we have all I see Mr. Oberdeer. Mr. Mitchell is not on the screen. Maybe, yeah. Either that or he, instead of hitting the mute button, he hit the power button. All right, I'm going to go ahead and call the regular meeting of the Destin City Council, April 20th, 2020, to order. Up first is we have our invocation. Do we have an invocation, Ray? No, we don't. So we'll just start with Mr. Marler. Lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Up first is the agenda approval. Does anyone have any changes to the agenda?
I got to add something to the agenda.
Okay, hold on. We have an addition to the agenda. Go ahead, sir.
Just under my name, if we can put the holiday Isle spoils easements on there, please, so we can discuss it.
What was that?
Holiday Isle spoils easements. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead, sir.
Do we want to wait? Mr. Mitchell's just trying to get through right now. Do we want to wait on him?
We have a quorum, and we're just going to be approving the agendas at the moment. And if he would like to add something, we can go for a vote. Oh, there he is. Oh, I thought you said he was coming. There he is. Whole new world. You have to be more specific. I was thinking spatially. All right.
Mayor, motion to approve.
I have a motion.
Second.
And I have a second. All in favor? Well, I have to take a roll call, don't I?
Yep.
Mr. Braden.
Yes.
Ms. Ramswell.
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell. Agenda approval, Steve, if you can hear us, hit the mute button.
Steve, blink your eyes if you can hear us.
Hey, Steve, we'll do it the Roman ways. This is yes, that is no. Yes. Hey, that works for me, if it works for you, Mr. Overdeer. Mr. Overdeer? He's having problems too. Thumbs up, thumbs down? They're working on their phones.
Skip, text the mayor if you vote yes.
Technology's wonderful.
I'm going to press on. Mr. Marler?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Right. Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
And Mr. Overdeer?
Mayor, I'm here.
There you go. Thank you. Thanks, Steve. I did kind of like this part, though. That was good.
Well, the organizer had me muted. This wasn't operator error this time.
Yeah. That's your story, and you're sticking to it, right? All right. Mr. Overdeer, are you good? No. Mr. Overdeer is still not online. All right. We have enough that motion moves forward. Approved. All right. On the agenda, 1A, approval of the minutes of April 1st, 2020 special city council meeting.
I'll make that motion, Mayor.
Oh, okay.
I got a motion. Second. And I have a second. Is there any further comments? Seeing none. Mr. Braden.
Yes.
Ms. Ramswell.
Yes.
Mr. Marler.
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell.
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer.
Yes.
Mr. Destin.
Yes.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
So moved. Approval of minutes of the January 6, 2020 regular city council meeting.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion and a second. Mr. Braden.
Yes.
Ms. Ramswell.
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell.
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer.
Yes.
Mr. Marler.
Yes.
Mr. Destin.
Yes.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
So moved. All right. underneath 2A, we have an update, Raymond James update on city investments. Mr. Haugen, Brian Haugen's going to, Haugen.
Okay. Mayor, can we move them to the end of the meeting?
I'm new to town, so.
We could move this to the end of the meeting.
Oh,
or-
come on.
Oh, okay, you ready? Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right, well-
My bad. Brian Haugen, Steve Can. Nice to see y'all again. Want to give you a quick update. You already have the printed out report. And Steve will go into the details. I'll just give you the bottom line. The City of Destin is the only investment group in the world that's positive this year. And since our target goal is the 6-month T-bill,
Yes.
we are beating it by about 1,050%.
I'm just glad we didn't have any oil futures.
That would be bad. Yeah.
That would be bad.
That was a suggestion once, by the way. It was.
Who suggested it?
I will not share that.
Tuffy.
They're not on the commission, no, the council anymore.
Let's move on. Does anyone have any questions of the report? Steve? Mr. Oberdeer? No questions?
No, I'm good.
Guys, thanks for looking after the money.
Wow. This is going swimmingly well. Okay.
Brian, I got a quick question, please.
Yes, sir.
How much do we have that's not under the mattress?
That's an offline question. Did you just say that's not under the mattress? Oh.
Yeah.
Wow. Pretty much everything's under the mattress-ish.
Everything? I thought we was investing and took some funds and invested in a little more higher risk.
100% bonds.
Okay.
Everything is,
Which, ironically, again, we, were asked to come in a few months ago, and here we are tonight, and things have changed, of course, since then. But ironically, the portfolio you're in, which is bonds and CDs, and especially the bonds in this environment, not only don't lose, but they perform well. So, we look worse when the economy's roaring and the stock market's doing well, but in times like these, they're doing very well. It's very conservative, very liquid. Everything is last year was our best year since 2013 that we've worked with the city. This year is on track to be
we did
better
like
than that so far.
4.5% last year.
Yeah. It sucks for the rest of us, but for the portfolio and the bonds, it's fantastic. So it's good.
Yeah, and this looks like a trend that's probably going to take 1 or 2 more years to work out. So
Well,
this, most likely?
Yeah, so back in the last 20 or 30 years, interest rates have slowly, since the 80s, right, has gone down from 20-something% to 0. Passively investing in bonds, you would have made money from that. Interest rates now are skipping along on the bottom right here. And the only people that are making money in the bond market are active management. So the rules have changed. Fortunately, the active management structure that we have for this bond portfolio, he's taken full advantage of the volatility of the interest rate environment, which is why you all are doing so well.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
It's nice to have good news, especially today. All right, up next is a proclamation that I'm going to read. We decided I'm going to do it sitting down, and we're not going to do any type of presentation. And then on Arbor Day itself, we'll do a little thing, Miss Catherine and our recreational supervisor, Miss Firth, and we'll do a little thing we can put on social media. And we talked about what kind of tree we're going to plant, and we're going to look into planting a weeping willow in one of our parks if we make sure that they can thrive in our environment. If not, we'll probably go with a big shady magnolia. But we just decided, I thought a weeping willow would be a significant symbol of the challenges that we faced, and yet they're beautiful trees when they grow. And unless, of course, you're a kid, your mom comes out there and gets a switch off of it. like mine used to do. City of Destin proclamation, Destin Arbor Day. Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas this holiday, which is called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska. Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world. Whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, reduce heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce life-giving oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource, giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products. And whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community, they are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Gary Jarvis, on behalf of the City of Destin Council, do hereby proclaim April 24th, 2020 as Arbor Day in the City of Destin. And all citizens are urged to support the efforts to protect our trees and woodlands, and that further, all citizens are urged to plant trees to gladden hearts and promote the well-being of present and future generations. So done this 20th day of April, 2020. Thank you, everyone. Next up is Patrick Maddox, the hardest working man in Okaloosa County at the moment. He never sleeps. I can get updates at 2 a.m. or 2 p.m. 24/7. Sir, come on up and give us a proposal on the status of our county.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council, both local and remote. New day, new technology, good stuff. It's unfortunate that the times that I get to come out and see you, it always happens to be something like this. But it's a good time to come and say hello and let you know what's going on. And to be quite honest, you know, Webb and I were talking about what type of presentation I would come and give. And the presentation that I gave to my board last week about possibilities of reopening the beaches and what that may mean and the impacts that would have locally and along the coast. And then we have curveballs being thrown at us, like the president bringing out the Opening Up America plan again, and how that may or may not interact with a plan like reopening the beaches. So I thought it was important to come and talk to you about that today so that you'd understand what the similarities and differences are. And of course, for the folks at home who may have very many questions, these get convoluted. You know, as we can look from the governor's orders, many of them tie into each other. Some of them, the expiration dates are tied to expiration dates of other orders. It can become very confusing. So I thought I'd try to lay it out a little bit. And forgive me, I'll have to read off of my, my printed out version, because even with my binoculars on, I'm probably not going to see that. So the title page, of course, Demobilization of Emergency Protective Measures, Opening Up America Again Plan versus a Limited Reopening of the Beaches. And I thought it was important to start off with some definitions, what emergency protective measures are. And per FEMA, they're actions taken before, during, and after an incident to save lives, protect public health and safety, and prevent damage to improve public and private property. And demobilization, of course, is the orderly, safe, and efficient return of an incident resource to its original location and status. And as we all know, the emergency protective measures are the actions that we took when we saw this thing coming at us and really didn't know exactly what it was or what those impacts would be. And of course, there was guidance on both ends of that spectrum as to it's going to be nothing to it's the most terrible thing you've ever seen. So I don't think we had any possible choice but to raise our shields at that point. Looking at demobilization plans, the difference between Opening Up America Again, which is a phased reintegration plan proposed by President Trump, which uses gating criteria as a metric to enter into progressively less restrictive, defined phases of demobilization. And then we have something like limited reopening of the beaches, which is a phased reintegration of municipal and county beach access plan proposed by administration, which uses virus trend data and logistical data as metrics to enter into progressively less restrictive defined phases of beach access and use. And there's something very important about the reopening of the beaches that has to be understood before we go forward, and that's, of course, the governor didn't close the beaches. We closed the beaches. And that's an important thing to understand, because moving forward, many of the things that people are upset about and write into the councils about, both yours and the county, are please reopen these businesses, and we don't have control over that at the moment. So it's important to understand the difference between those two metrics and why we have to look at things differently. In the Opening Up America plan, it's based on up-to-date data and readiness, and this is right from the slides from the White House, mitigates risk of resurgence, protects the most vulnerable, our elderly population and those with underlying health conditions. It's implementable on statewide or county-by-county basis at the governor's discretion, and that's important. Each governor can make their own decision on how they're going to address their state. Gating criteria to be satisfied prior to entering phases, and it's phased 1 through 3 with guidelines for individuals, employers, and specific types of employers, which all have a little bit of different criteria in there as to how to apply those metrics. I said it could get convoluted. No choice of that up to this point, right? So the success of the Opening Up America Again plan is predicated upon continuing to practice good hygiene, of course, washing hands, covering coughs, sneezes, disinfecting frequently touched items, avoid touching the face, and wearing face coverings. And what was so challenging about this particular part is we were building the plane in flight on this one. We were learning about this novel virus as we were moving along. You know, at first it was, well, the CDC didn't recommend healthy people wearing masks in public, and now, of course, we're on the other side of that. So as we moved through this, the guidelines began to change on us, which is why we had to have different reactions at different times during these processes. Sick people staying home from work, school, and leisure activities, and that's tantamount to what we have to do. That's the key to our success. Following CDC, state, and local guidelines. Again, one of the things we absolutely have to do. And then we move into the gating criteria itself. So you see it's divided into 3 areas. We have symptoms, cases, and hospitals. And each one of them have 2 metrics. So the symptoms we're looking for a downward trajectory of influenza-like illnesses, or ILI if you look at it in the medical world, reported within a 14-day period. You're going to see that 14-day period quite a lot, and that is because that is the reproductive nod, the symptomatic trend for the virus, and a downward trajectory of COVID-like syndromic cases within a 14-day period. So that's an and, both of those to be satisfied. Cases, downward trajectory of documented cases within a 14-day period, and this is an or, downward trajectory of positive tests as a % of total tests within a 14-day period if you have flat or increasing volume of tests. So the idea there is not to have your % positive tied only to more testing. And that's, of course, sometimes what we see. If you do 1,000 more tests on that particular day, the idea is you're going to probably have more positives on that date. So what they're looking for there is, even though you're doing more testing, you're still staying flat or below your level of positives. And of course, hospitals treat all patients without crisis care, so not spilling into the field hospitals and to the other areas that we've set up for surge capacity. And a robust testing program in place for at-risk healthcare workers, including emergency antibody testing. So those are the metrics, the gating criteria that they're trying to have satisfied before we even begin to move into the phasing portion of the Reopening America plan. Going into phase 1, for states and regions which meet the gating criteria, those words are important because, again, the governor can address this either as a statewide measure or region by region. And of course, these are just some graphs that I pulled on the date that I put this together, which was on Sunday. And there's a sit rep, which most of you are probably familiar with seeing, that I send to you when I get them, as well as some of the statewide emergency department, ED department chief complaint and admissions data. The first graph on the upper left on that was cough-associated admissions. As you can see, there was a spike around late March, early April, and then a downtrend to where we are now. And then, of course, the ED visits for the COVID-like syndromes, the cough, fever, shortness of breath, which spiked again around the same time and is on the downtrend now since probably, looks like, maybe late March. The dates are the 11th and the 25th. It spikes before that, so perhaps around the 20th. And then the daily % of ED visits, which mentioned cough by age group. And of course, those spiked around the same time, even maybe a bit earlier, and are way, way down into the downtrend, actually around the same numbers that we had in January. So as far as trends go, that's where your trending data comes from, and we are certainly on the downward side of that slope. Moving forward, for which states and regions can meet the gating criteria, we're looking at some other documentation here. That shows you, on the first graph on the left, the table, what the percent positive is versus the total testing. So here we have Okaloosa, and this was Sunday again. We had over 1,600 tested, and we were at about 8% positive. We've seen the trend in the state and around the United States actually anywhere from 8.5 to 11%-ish, around there, fluctuating slightly depending on the number of tests done. So there's some other regional data. Escambia tested in the 4,500 range with 7%. Santa Rosa, over 2,000 tested with 7%. Walton County, 420 tested, 8%. Bay County, 832 tested, 7%. Gulf County, 109 tested, 1%, and Franklin with 66 tested at 3%. The graph on your right is the ILI, the influenza-like year-to-year projection, and mine's in black and white, but the one up there is in color. So you can see, I believe the white one is 2019 and 2020, and you can see where we are there, and clearly moving down to numbers that we had quite some time ago. And clearly below even some of the other years that we have up there. So the phase one individual portion, again, we have individuals, employers, and certain types of employers. Even in phase one, after we've met the gating criteria, it is still recommended that all vulnerable individuals should continue to shelter in place. Members of households with vulnerable residents should be aware that by returning to work or other environments where distancing is not practical, they could carry the virus back home. Precautions should be taken to isolate from vulnerable residents. The goal of this was to protect the elderly, the vulnerable. That was one of the main goals. The other goal was to not crash the healthcare system. Right, so we wanted to make sure that everything didn't spike at once, overwhelm our hospitals, and take away the beds, the ventilators, the resources, the staff, and not have us be able to attend to everyday illnesses, let alone the spike in COVID illnesses. All individuals, when in public, for example, parks, outdoor recreation areas, shopping areas, should maximize physical distance from others. Social settings of more than 10 people, where appropriate distancing may not be practical, should be avoided unless precautionary measures are observed. Avoid socializing in groups of more than 10 in circumstances that do not readily allow for appropriate physical distancing, for example, receptions, trade shows. And minimize non-essential travel to adhere to CDC guidelines regarding isolation following travel. Many of these things we're doing now. Most of the things that we're doing here actually meet most of these guidelines, not all, but a good portion of them. And many of us have put policies in place, particularly involving travel, to minimize some of those risks. Phase one employers continue to encourage telework. We've developed a pretty good telework program for the county. We've been able to free up some resources and allow some folks to telework, particularly those in the vulnerable categories and those who are able to do so with their job description allows. If possible, return to work in phases. Again, very important to have a plan to go ahead and bring people back in phases so that the lights aren't turned on all at once. Close common areas where personnel are likely to congregate and interact, or enforce strict social distancing. And the word strict is underlined there because in a different part of the phase, in a different phase actually, that turns into moderate rather than strict. Minimize non-essential travel and adhere to CDC guidelines regarding isolation following travel. Strongly consider special accommodations for personnel who are members of a vulnerable population, and I think we all jumped on that very early to protect our folks. And then we move on to the specific types of employers for phase one. Schools and organized youth activities, daycares, camps that are currently closed should remain closed, and the governor announced that just the other day. Visits to senior living facilities and hospitals should be prohibited. Those who do interact with residents and patients must adhere to strict protocols regarding hygiene. We're in that position now where we have an outbreak in our county in one of our long-term care facilities, and it's a horrible thing to think about. It's devastating to realize that at this point it has to play out, you know, as to where it's at, and you wish you could go back in time and figure out how it got there and change it, but we're there. we're there. So, minimizing that and making sure that that doesn't happen anywhere else. We're asking for everybody's all-hands-on-deck approach to that. Don't go visit anybody if you're able to. We understand that there's end-of-life scenarios and things perhaps where those still take place, but it's incredibly important for healthcare workers who are sick to not go to work. It's incredibly important to not try to walk that virus back into one of those facilities. Large venues, sit-down dining, movie theaters, sporting venues, places of worship can operate under strict physical distancing protocols. Elective surgeries can resume, and those are locked down tight right now, but in phase 1 they can resume as clinically appropriate on an outpatient basis at facilities that adhere to the CMS guidelines. Gyms can open if they adhere to strict physical distancing and sanitation protocols. And bars should still remain closed at that point, which I can imagine will cause some discussion. Just guessing. As far as phase 2, things begin to get a little bit less restricted, but this, if you look, is for states and regions with no evidence of a rebound, and that's important because as we begin to turn the volume down a little bit, we have to take administrative pause, look at the data, and make sure we didn't make a mistake. Is there something that shows, all right, wait a minute, we need to step back a minute so that we don't wind up back in the same bag again? And there is, it can happen. We don't know yet. But we do have control groups out there right now who have gotten out ahead of us a little bit, like Duval County. So their beaches are open. And it will be very interesting to look in 14 days, 21 days to see what those numbers are, because right now that's our control group. They are the first ones to be out there up and running, as far as I know, in Florida. Except I think Volusia County may have had their beaches open a little bit longer. But I don't think they had ever actually closed them as hard as Duval did. So we actually have a scenario similar to ours where it was down and open now. So we can look to the future to look at that and see what those numbers are. And which satisfied the gating criteria a second time. So there's no evidence of a rebound, and we're still on that downward trend over that 14 days. And there's some more graphs again. I believe they're the same graphs that I had there. Phase 2 for individuals. Vulnerable individuals should continue to shelter in place. So you see the pattern here. The vulnerable individuals, the folks that are elderly, the folks that have the underlying health conditions, we're still looking to protect them because there is no other way. They have poor outcomes generally if they do catch this virus. So it's still incredibly important, even at this phase, to protect these folks. Members of households with vulnerable residents should be aware that by returning to work or other environments where distancing is not practical, they could carry the virus back home. Precautions should be taken to isolate from vulnerable residents. Individuals, when in Publix, should maximize physical distance from others, social settings of more than 50 people, so we went from 10 to 50 now that we're in this phase. Where appropriate, distancing may not be practical, should be avoided unless precautionary measures are observed. Non-essential travel can resume. A little bit different there. Employers, continue telework whenever possible and feasible with business operations, close common areas where personnel are likely to congregate, or enforce moderate, there's the difference in the strict and the moderate between the two phases, social distancing protocols, strongly consider special accommodations for personnel who are members of a vulnerable population. And to the specific types of employers. Schools and organized youth activities can reopen. Visits to senior care facilities and hospitals should be prohibited still. Those who do interact with the residents, again, must adhere to strict protocols regarding hygiene. Large venues, movie theaters, sit-down dining can operate under moderate physical distancing protocols. Elective surgeries can resume as clinically appropriate, an outpatient and inpatient basis at facilities that adhere to the guidelines. Gyms can reopen if they adhere to strict physical distancing and sanitation. And here's where bars may operate with diminished standing room occupancy where applicable and appropriate. And finally to phase 3. And here we have again reference to the gating criteria for states and regions with no evidence of a rebound again. So we're still looking, even when we get to phase 3, we're looking to make sure that we didn't make a mistake, we didn't move too quickly. And which satisfied the gating criteria for a third time, make sure that we're still on that downward trend over a 14-day period. Individuals, vulnerable individuals can resume public interactions, but should practice physical distancing, minimizing exposure to social settings where distancing may not be practical unless precautionary measures are observed. Low-risk populations should consider minimizing time spent in crowded environments. Employers can resume unrestricted staffing to work sites. And the specific types of employers, visitors to senior care facilities and hospitals can resume, but those who interact with residents and patients must be diligent regarding hygiene. Large venues can operate under limited physical distancing protocols. Gyms can remain open if they adhere to standard sanitation protocols. Bars may operate with increased standing room occupancy where applicable. So that's an incredibly elaborate phased program that we hope we can get to at some point. And as we look around, even on my way here as I was driving, we have different states that are actually starting, the governors are starting to come out and announce some limited reopenings. I know Tennessee, Georgia are both in that category. I don't have those details in front of me. Actually, I may have a little bit. Tennessee will not extend their safer at home past April 30th. And I believe Georgia has begun announcements for April 24th, their gyms, nail salons, and hair salons. April 27th, eat inside restaurants. April 30th, the stay-at-home order expires, and May 13th, the public health emergency expires. So we're starting to see other states taking action, and that's, of course, based on that Opening Up America plan. And whether or not they meet those gating criteria, well, that's for their governor to determine, and we'll see what our governor says. I know they had a meeting today at 2 o'clock on his reopening Florida task force, and I have not heard anything that has come out of that as of yet. And then limited reopening of the beaches, which is important to all of us. And I'm going to burn through this one rather quickly because I've been bending your ear for quite some time. So just identified factors and metrics. We're still going to continue to look at state and local virus statistics. Are they up, down, trending, regional virus statistics, drive-to market statistics? All of these things are important to make sure that the opening of the beaches is something that we can actually handle without that rebound. Now, when we look at something like that, it's kind of important to realize that if the governor makes a decision like they did in Georgia, where we're going to open the businesses and the restaurants are going to be open, and we haven't decided to reopen the beaches yet, well, that might push that decision one way or another a little bit quicker. But this document here about reopening the beaches was created absent the Reopen America plan. So just keep that in mind, temper that as we go forward. The total cases for Florida were actually on the way up still, but that's a graph that shows a total of the cases going up. No matter how small those numbers are, if you only look at the total cases, they'll continue to go up even if you get one case per day. So it's important not to get target locked on that one particular graph because it's actually the growth rate, how many cases are added each day, that is more important than the fact that a case is being added. And I apologize that I haven't been using this high-speed clicker here. I guess I probably should have been doing that for you. But. Daily new cases in the state of Florida. This was as of Sunday. And as you can see, it's a fairly good curve. It's a fairly good bell curve there. And then towards the end, around the 13th, you see those two spikes. And as you know, the downward trend's coming down, you see those two spikes a little bit after the 13th, and those two dates are the 16th and 17th. And the actual curve that you see right there, you can actually mirror the number of tests. There's a curve that shows the number of tests done per day, and on those two dates, the number of tests were exponentially higher. I want to say it was in the neighborhood of 300 or 400 tests more higher, and those dates spiked. So again, in some of the gating criteria, we want to see, even though we have more testing or flat level testing, we still want to see those numbers coming down would be an ideal graph for us. It doesn't mean it's a game changer or a killer for us, but we would like to see that eventually. The total cases in Okaloosa plotted daily. Again, as you can see, that is a total graph. That is a number going up, and that graph will never come down as long as there are more cases being plotted in Okaloosa County. So if you become target locked on that graph, it would be horrific looking at it, saying, my God, it's never going to change. But if you go to the next slide, in reality, that's what we look at with new cases per day. So as you can see, we have numbers like 4, 6, 3, 7. We have some there, and again, you know, when we have an outbreak in a long-term care facility, you may have a jump of 9 in a day, and that's a horrible thing to have. But it does exist, and it does happen. And although we show, yesterday we showed 21 hospitalizations, There were actually 8 bodies in the hospital. There were 8 people, 8 humans occupying beds at that time. So again, that number, that 21, is being added and cumulative. And that's the way that DOH was tracking the data. But if you go into the ACA ESS fields and you find how many people are actually occupying beds, today it was 7, yesterday it was 8. So those numbers will change, although that cumulative number will continue to climb. As one person gets cured and leaves or is released to recover at home and another person gets added, that number will be 22, even though that one person is no longer in the hospital. So this was a brief snapshot of what our hospital care system looks like, because of course one of those metrics and one of the goals was not overwhelming the hospital system. That was one of the greatest fears we had when we first saw this thing coming out of Wuhan, China, and said, my goodness, it's going to spike. And if you look at Governor DeSantis' graph that he showed today, the projection was astronomical. In reality, we're kind of down here. The available hospital beds we have are 451, available 193, that was 42.79%, not terrible. Available ICU beds, total 57, available 22. We were still over 40%. Available ventilators, I didn't have a number for all of the hospitals, but at Fort Walton Beach Medical, we had 31 alone. And have we hit surge capacity? No. Hospital virus statistics, again, just more graphs. Some of those graphs I had already up there on the beginning in the Opening Up America plan. On the next slide, that is again the cough-associated surveillance and the COVID-like symptoms-associated surveillance. Again, those numbers are not climbing. It's a typical graph for a typical year with some spikes that go up and down, and it's right in there along with a pretty steady line, certainly not climbing and staying high. Availability of PPE and supplies, and goodness, if I hear the word PPE after this, I'm ready to stop hearing it for a little while. But, you know, we've been looking at having to activate our strategic national stockpile from the state level to actually look at this and say, okay, we need so many of these. We're competing with the entire world for the same supplies, which is what led to some of the slowdown. We were very fortunate in Okaloosa County that we had a robust logistics department, and our EMS logistics chief was really on his game and had many of these things ordered long before this began. And we jumped on it with some very good guidance from our commission as well to order very early, and we are starting to see some of the benefits of that. Has the strategic national stockpile and state supply chain caught up? It's in progress and it's improving. If you remember a few weeks ago, you go into Publix, there was no meat on the shelves. My goodness, the thought of becoming a vegetarian was way scarier to me than any virus. I can't do it, it's not my blood. So the fact that these things are not a threat to me anymore and I can go in and buy a steak right now, you know, that's great for me. Other supplies like toilet paper and hand sanitizer we're beginning to see available as well. Our first responders and hospitals stocked up. It's improving. Can I say that they have a robust stockpile of PPE and they can waste it at random? No, certainly not. But are they operating, and are they able to operate with the gear that they have, and can we replenish it right now when they run out? The answer is yes. Is there surplus PPE, and does inventory exceed the burn rate? That is improving. I would not say there is surplus PPE. We do have PPE in inventory to hand out when it is needed, and it is being replenished, which is the best answer I can give at that point. And actually, I'm very happy to be able to give that answer because there are other counties that are not so fortunate in that regard. Availability to staff, our first responders and hospital staff level sufficient. Locally, yes, we're doing well. Have exposed staff returned to duty. EMS, we had some exposures. Thank goodness none of them actually tested positive, so yes, they've been able to come back to work. Our new protocols help. We instituted some new protocols very early in EMS as the guidelines from the CDC were changing, where our first responders were wearing surgical masks on every single call, even if it was a trauma call and there were no COVID symptoms. We were wearing a surgical mask anyway, just in case, and that actually, we've had no more exposures since. So we've been doing very well with that. My EMS chief is excellent in that regard, and he drives that mission very hard, as do his captains. Is leave still being canceled? And we didn't have to cancel leave for any of our folks, any of our first responders, so we never had to amend the schedule as far as that's concerned. And we have not had to change their schedule at all. They're still working their normal schedule. Pace and tone of executive orders. Are more restrictive orders coming out? No, quite the opposite. They're beginning demobilization campaigns. And then particularly opening up America again. Are existing EOs being allowed to expire or be extended? The vacation rentals, of course, that one was extended. That was 2087. It was extended to be a 2103. But we will see what happens on April 30th, and then again on May 9th, with the safer at home and then the state of emergency. Our support agencies issuing additional EOs, and the last restrictive one was on the 27th of March, which was FWC with the 50-foot rule for the recreational vessels. So in the summary, the data discussed indicates that new local cases vary with test numbers still right now. So if we are testing more, we're getting more positives at the moment. Over the last 2 weeks, an average of 9% of cases tested have been positive. Data suggests that the rate of infection is slowing but not stopped. And I don't expect that it will actually stop for some time. We're going to get onesies and twosies months from now, I have no doubt. Data suggests that local, regional, and state healthcare system has not been overwhelmed, and President Trump has directed the governors to develop and implement demobilization plans. Some beaches in Florida have been opened. So like I mentioned earlier, the reasonable goal was never to prevent everyone in Okaloosa County from contracting COVID-19. That would be a pipe dream, and I would love for that to have happened, but the reasonable goal was to prevent catastrophe in the vulnerable populations and prevent collapse of the healthcare system. The mental health of the population is something to consider, and the mitigation measures only work and last as long as they're tolerated. And I had the word tolerated in italics because it's important to understand that people will let us know when they feel they've had enough. And it's important for us to listen to that and to act with safety and wisdom. And finding the balance in those two things, thank goodness, is not up to me. It's up to fine folks like you and fine folks like my board who have to make those very, very tough decisions. I have the easy job in simply presenting the data to you for you to do the tough lifting. So unfortunately, that part's for you. We created a demobilization unit led by my DCA, Craig Coffey, with our Public Works Director, Jason Autry, as deputy. We would like to think that we wouldn't have to face the same challenges during demobilization that we faced during mobilization and coordinate with our cities and with our sister counties so that we could have some measure of coordination along the coast. I don't know if that's exactly going to happen. I thought it would have been easier if we just had to worry about reopening the beaches. But now with the Reopen America plan, I think we're going to be back to a bunch of different places doing different things in a different order, perhaps. I know our governor has been very good about allowing regions to take care of their own, so we may be back to regions making decisions. I mean, we just don't know. We haven't seen what comes out of that meeting yet. Observe statistics for other demobilizing jurisdictions. Duval is a good control group for us to watch, so that's something we take into consideration as to how long do we want to wait or should we wait before we look at implementing these measures. Is there any value in saying, okay, what happens in a week? What happens in 2 weeks when we have a control group to watch? And that's a tough decision. Have a contingency plan for administrative pause if signs of reinfection begin, which I think we have, not only in the Open Up America again, but we look at these things every week in the county because we have our meetings every week. So we look at the possibility of beginning demobilization with limited beach and park hours, and that's at a date to be determined because we haven't chosen that yet, and my board certainly hasn't chosen that yet. It will allow for time to monitor the trending in the data. It will be only 2 weeks before the governor's Safer at Home EO expires, and extending look further at demobilization or administrative pause, and implement phased demobilization in 2-week stages if there's no need for an administrative pause. So again, we really don't know what that looks like just yet because we're expecting some news from the governor shortly. And we have to look at whether or not now, with the Reopen America plan, that we take a stab at the beaches before that comes out or after that comes out, and that's a tough decision to make. And like I said, thank goodness it's not up to me, but it will be up to you. And that, thank goodness, brings me to the end of this long-winded conversation. And I apologize it took so long, but there was so much data to share, and to make sure that since I get an opportunity to do this very rarely, that I gave you the best shot at it that I could.
Well, I really appreciate it, and I think the people that are watching remotely appreciate it too. It's very fact-filled, not emotion-filled. I imagine some of our council members have a question or two. I have one. You piqued my interest when you were talking about we have an incident at the Fort Walton Beach Extended Care. My question is how many new cases have we had other than the extended care facility? Because I know they had a big impact on, what would you say, like 26 cases?
That was the number, I believe. In speaking with Dr. Chapman, there may even be 2 that are out of county that came from that particular facility. And there are substantial numbers that are outside of that 26. I can't give you exact numbers, but there are substantial cases. Within the last few days, not many cases have been attributed to that. 2 of the deaths have. But the actual cases that are coming outside of that have been outside of that facility.
Thank you. I've got Mr. Braden has
Mr.
some
Mayor?
questions.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, buddy. Where you was talking about people being tested, like, where it was spiking the numbers for each day, it was, I guess there'd be like 200 people tested a day, but 500 tested, tomorrow or something. That's why the spike. On those, and where people are being tested positive, is that people are being tested positive that don't have any symptoms whatsoever? That's being calculated in these numbers?
Right now, there is no asymptomatic testing going on. With the availability of the test kits, you have to be determined as necessary for a test by a medical professional in order to be tested.
So much.
Yes, sir.
So those are tests of people with symptoms of
Yes,
some kind?
Yes, sir. The only exception to that, as I believe they are doing, if you have an outbreak in a facility, depending on DOH and ACA's recommendation, they may test other folks in that facility, in one of the long-term care facilities, because some of them may be asymptomatic and part of that vulnerable population.
On the subject of testing, how are we as far as having tests available in the county? We good?
We have tests available in the county. Of course, we'd always like more. But we do have tests available in the county. Right now, I believe the number that was given for Florida was 1 out of every 84. So it's a little bit less than 1% is being tested, and I think we're right around that number for Okaloosa County.
Cool. Well, maybe that contact I gave you earlier today, we can get some more tests.
Hey,
huh?
let's see what we can do.
Yeah, that sounds good. My last question would be, where are we today in the county as far as the metrics that you were explaining to us? Where are we since, say, like April 15th till today, which is the last 5 days? Are we on a upward slide, downward slide? Where are we? Because the data you were gave us was a larger time set.
There was, but I believe I want to say that the data that I had in here with the slide that had the daily numbers for Okaloosa County captured that. Give me just a second to find it. New cases in Okaloosa per day, and I don't have the slide number for you, but it looks like this.
Yeah, I got it.
And that one, so on the 15th, we had an additional 9 cases, on the 16th an additional 3, 17th additional 7, 18th an additional 2. So it kind of does this, and it's going to do that. Depending on the number of tests per day, right now they're still linked to the number of positives. So the more tests, the more positives at this point.
Was that the 15th, was that associated with the Fort Walton Beach extended care, or was that earlier in the month?
I honestly couldn't tell you on that date. I don't have that date in front of me.
Thank
But
you.
I think the 15th might have been one of those days where a larger number of tests were done, if I remember correctly.
Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Mayor. So who's going to determine what phase we're in? I know the data's going to dictate that, but who's going to make that declaration that we're in phase 1? Is it the governor?
We're waiting for the governor to lay out that plan to give us that direction, sir.
Okay, because I would assume that regionally, Panhandle is going to be much different than South Florida.
I would say that's fair to say.
So there's probably a good chance that we can be in a different phase in Miami.
Certainly, certainly.
Okay, and then, in phase 2, so once we're in phase 1, it'll be 14 days until we're in phase 2, correct? At a minimum.
Not necessarily. We would still have to meet the criteria for the gating again. So if it took 3 weeks or 4 weeks for us to continue to be in a downward turn over 14 days, then we could go to phase 2.
But at a minimum, it would be 2 weeks.
At a minimum.
Okay. And then non-essential travels allowed in phase 2 or recommended in phase 2, that it's okay, and that would, to me, be defined as tourism, more or less, right?
I don't have an answer for that or an
Yeah.
interpretation to that. It could be not essential business travel.
Sure.
I haven't received any further direction other than what was written on that one.
I got it. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
All right, Ms. Ramswell.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for your presentation. I just have a question in terms of percentages. So typically, we're looking at about 8% of those being tested have the virus. Is that correct?
Locally and statewide are a little bit different. I believe the state was somewhere in the 10% range, and we were somewhere between 8 and 9.
So if I take this to sort of another level, if that's the percentage of folks being tested and who are coming back with positives, if we take the population of Okaloosa County, which is about 210,000, if we take the 131 folks that are diagnosed positive here, that's only 0.06 of our total population. Does that sound right to you?
Sounds right.
So we're really looking at something that's only impacting, at least to the point of a diagnosis, 0.06 of our population.
Yes, but you have to look at the fact that only the symptomatic are being tested.
Right.
So there is no real metric to find out exactly what is there, and that has been some of the consternation and some of the question is that the asymptomatic testing is just not there at the moment.
Okay, great, thank you.
Ma'am.
Mr. Menchel, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Mr. Maddox, thank you so much for your information. Appreciate it. I have a series of questions. I'll just go down one at a time. First of all, Mr. Maddox, have you discussed with the public or private hospitals or any of our testing facilities their capabilities and future plans for testing?
Those discussions are being held by the Department of Health with those hospitals, so they handle most of the conversations with the hospitals themselves. We do have some visibility on some of the testing that is being set up. For example, we have another drive-through testing facility being set up right here in Destin this week, actually, Mondays and Wednesdays, I believe 9 A to 1 P, if that's accurate. So, you know, some of the, and that was through Ascension Sacred Heart, so, and they will be staffing that themselves with their own people. So that is an example of one of the ways that they're stepping up, and the hospital staff is coming forward and assisting with that type of thing.
Okay, moving on, and you understand where I'm going with this when I get to my next series of questions. Do you have any idea the cost of these tests?
The last figure that I heard was about $100 per test.
Okay, and the reason I'm bringing that up, just for us to think about as policymakers, there's obviously going to be other monies out there and grants that we may go back to the governor and or the government if we get to the point of testing. Like Dr. Ramswell said, she talked about statistics of people that have it, but that's obviously only the people that have been tested. So if we get to the point moving forward that we feel like Destin needs to test, I'm curious about that money, because we may end up going back to the state and or the government at a city, from a city level, requesting money. From a stabilization standpoint, you mentioned that. I realize the curve is up and down. If, in your discussions with Dr. Chapman, and you talked about the beach, and I don't know if anybody in the county has asked you this yet, but was up to Dr. Chapman right now, would she be willing to open the beach?
I can't speak for Dr. Chapman. I wouldn't venture to speak for Dr. Chapman. I know that we have had discussions about different concerns and ways that we would be able to do it, but I certainly don't want to put words in her mouth, sir.
No, I understand. No, certainly, I understand that. I just didn't know if you all had that actual thing, but that'll be a question for her. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, and thanks for all your hard work of your staff.
My pleasure, sir.
Any other council members have any questions? Mr. Maddox, excellent presentation. Thank you so
sir.
much.
My pleasure.
You answered a lot of questions. Thank you.
Thank you for all you're doing as well. It has made a tremendous difference, and people are suddenly online twice a day looking at the updated reports, and it's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, we'll just move on into our public comments section under item 3. These are public comments on agenda items that are not public hearings and any other matters not on the agenda. All agenda items other than those under number 5. We're going to process here, now that we're doing this remote public meetings, what we'll do is I'll recognize the people in the room to come up like normal and make their public comments, and then I'll look to Mr. Bailey and ask him if he has any questions or comments from the public that need to be stated. And lastly, I'll check with our IT folks and see if they've received any questions from folks that are watching the meeting here online. And then, Kyle, you can remind me of every mistake I make in this process, because I'm a rookie at this, doing this type of public meeting. So first up, I just want to remind folks, when they come up, if we could, can we just leave the microphone on so people don't have to handle that? If you feel, we have hand wipes up there when you come up to speak, and just state your name and where you live for the public record. So anyone that wants to come up first? Mr. Elvis, I had to say it. Go ahead, Ron.
All right, my name's Ron Adams. I live at 261 Champion Court. I was here about 2 weeks ago, basically talking about that we need to be planning for when we do go to phase one, so that we're not caught behind the 8 ball. I don't know how much work y'all done on that. Obviously, now you're thinking about it and talking about it. None of us know, that was a very good question you had, when is phase one, so we'll know when to be ready. None of us know when that is, but South Carolina, is opening up on Friday, so they're starting their phase one on Friday. Georgia is as well on Friday. And of course, Mr. Maddox was talking about Tennessee. I don't know, but I've got some contacts that says that he may actually, in the morning at 9 o'clock, give us a date. That date may very well be this Friday. So we certainly need to be ready to do whatever it is that, that we're going to do as a city, that you're going to do. Mr. Maddox also said something else that was very important, and he said that he don't have to make these decisions, and you guys do. And it's going to take courage either way, because what you're weighing is very evident. You want to open up as quickly as possible so that people don't lose their jobs and we have business back and things are back to normal. But at the same time, you don't want to open up so soon that there's deaths and people say it's your fault. So it's going to take a lot of courage. I'm certainly glad that you brought up your percentages, because I had already figured those percentages. So it's good that we keep it in perspective. I don't want to downplay this virus. I know it's very serious and it's affecting a lot of people. But I wonder now, is it quite as bad as what we were initially told? I actually say it's not. They first said it was going to be 2 million people that died. Then it was 200,000, which was a major change in their model. Then it was 88,000. Then it was 68,000. Then about a week or so ago, it went to 60,000. Now, 60,000 people out of 328 million is not very many people. If that's the case, okay, it's not very many people. And like you had said, in this county, we're not talking 10% or 1% or 0.5%. Or even 1/10 of 1%. We're talking 0.06%. Now, another thing that y'all brought up that I wanted to bring up, and I'm glad that you already brought it up, is the percentages of people that are testing positive. All right, so you have a lot of people being tested. And I know personally that you have to, like he had said, you have to be symptomatic. Because I had a friend that tried to get tested and they wouldn't test her. They said, there's no place that you have to test. You have to go to Pensacola. But she called her doctor, and they said, well, what do you have? Well, I've got a bad sore throat, and I've got real bad body aches, and I've got a fever. And she said, well, what's your fever? Well, it's 100. Well, your fever needs to be 101 before they'll test you. So then the next day, I told her, I said, are you taking acetaminophen or NSAIDs? She said, yeah. I said, those are keeping your fever down. Those are fever reducers. Get off of that, and I bet your fever will go up. It did. It went up to 102. So they asked her, would you like to be, she asked them, can I go be tested? And they said, no, you still can't be tested. You need to, so they gave her a Zithromax, and maybe she had the flu. My point is, if you've got 8% of the people that's symptomatic that have to qualify to be tested, but she didn't even qualify, then they're sick. Something's wrong with them. They probably have the flu or they have the COVID-19. So you have 92% of the people that probably have the flu. Now, My question is, how many of these 92% died? We don't know. We don't know the answer to that. Hurry up, is it? Okay. We don't know the answer to that, you know, but I do know that Katie Adams was a nurse over in Fort Walton. They thought that she was 46 years old, very healthy. She died. They thought that she had COVID-19. Turns out that it was influenza A. So how many people that we've had die of influenza, you know, at this same time period? So while it's important, we also need to remember that what I'm trying to do is I'm not really speaking for myself, though I'm speaking from my heart and I believe what I'm saying. I'm speaking for hundreds of people that have called me and said, Ron, I own a business. When can I open up? Do you have any idea? Are you going to the meeting? Can you tell them that I've got to open up or I'm going out of business? Neiman Marcus has already closed down. They're going bankrupt, you know, all over the world because of COVID-19. So all the people that says, well, right now I can stay home and I get a government check and everything's fine, those people are not going back to their jobs. And I personally know other places like John Wiener's famous store, they're not opening back up in a lot of other places. Nevertheless, I guess my point is, you know, we need to figure out how we're going to open up. When we open up the beaches, are we going to do it like 7 to 9, 7 days a week, and then 5 to 7, as some people suggested? Or are we going to do it all day long to spread the people out so that when they go, and I know that you need to be walking and jogging and not laying on the beach so that you are staying socially distanced. And the same way with the restaurants. Is it going to be 50%? And phase 1, if that starts on Friday, we need to let people know what's going to be going on.
Thank you, Ron.
So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Ms. Bell? Okay, next, anyone? All right. Thank you. It's not like it's going to be a mad rush. Not to the podium today, anyways. We may have some questions from our viewers.
Good evening. Karen Lugo. My husband is an ER physician, has been for 30 years, also emergency medicine chief for 2 very large ER departments at one of the nation's largest medical delivery systems. He currently practices in Louisiana. He has been emphatic since this began that the only legitimate role of government was to, as we've heard tonight from Mr. Maddox, flatten the curve, manage the load. The whole idea was to not overwhelm hospitals. And now that we're to a point where we're recognizing that the curve has been managed almost everywhere but maybe 2 cities. I know Dr. Burke said this evening, Chicago and parts of Massachusetts, Boston, were still hot zones. So at this point, I think you see a lot of unrest in this nation because people have begun to realize that the entire rationale, the entire justification for this constitutionally and medically has shifted to we as government are going to keep you safe. And people know government cannot do that. Medicine will tell you, my husband will tell you, once people begin to move around again, the virus will move again. It has been shuttered, but it will begin to move again. And when a county has low numbers, as Okaloosa does, it won't take much. You talk about an assisted living home. It won't take much to completely destroy your 2-week gating data because only a few people, when you have a very, very low number to start with, will begin to move that data. So you cannot be slavish to some of these rules when regions are so unique and so different. And people are beginning to ask a lot of questions. They were patient, they were cooperative, they were helpful. But at this point, when the casualties, as far as the businesses, the divorces, the people that, the families, the debt we're putting on our grandchildren, the unknowns into our future for the next few months, this is now where scales are tipping, and people are not understanding anymore why government has such a heavy-handed role in this. So I'm here tonight. Obviously, everyone knows I'm a vacation rental owner, and I've talked to a lot of other owners who are on the edge. I mean, anyone involved in any kind of a business with income and certainly related to tourism, it's been very difficult. Short-term rentals have come through a winter where they had been collecting all of the money, and we've already had the controversy about refunds. But many of them have refunded $40,000 and $50,000. They've had cancellations into June and July, and at this point, that is it. They'd improved their homes, they had the money in the bank, they spent the winter months improving and updating, and here we are now going into the summer, and they're living on savings and their retirement money. But that, I know that we're a small factor in what you're having to consider. And I know as you look at the beaches and as people are wanting to get back out, and my husband cannot even fathom how beach areas are closed. Because if it's managed, and that's where we all are with personal responsibility. I mean, we have learned, we've been trained. You don't, I watch people not even tailgate anymore because they're so concerned about social distancing. So as we manage and the virus does move again and we get closer to herd immunity, this is such an important part of where we're headed, and we can't stop that. But we move towards the vaccines, which we're looking at 70 of those in development. That'll be into the fall to winter. But it is so important to recognize the known casualties. I wish that there were presentations like what was made tonight that also talked about the numbers of people and businesses and the total devastation and destruction that this is wreaking on people who are being forced to stay inside and to not have the freedom and liberty to move and to conduct their businesses the way they have. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bell?
Marcy Bell, 3 Gulf Breeze Court. So I was going to speak on items 5 through A and E, but I will hold that for later. I understand that's what I should be doing. So I'll skip over that part because those are hearings. I guess
Yes.
I can speak at that time?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So I'll move on to a couple of other items that I was making notes in the back about. So this morning on CBS News, which I like to talk about a lot because that's the station that I like to watch, they talked about how the state of Arkansas had a 34% increase over the past week in confirmed cases. And I bring that up because it's my understanding that they did not shut down their state. And I had a group of individuals that were on Holiday Isle that I personally photographed from behind and posted, and they were from Arkansas. We talk about personal responsibility, and they were here in a short-term rental that was being rented during the closure by the governor of those vacation rentals. So that's concerning to me when we're talking about opening our beaches in reference to those who will come here. And I bring that up because our beaches are closed today. Maybe Captain Nix can speak a little bit more to this, but I watched the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Department run up and down Holiday Isle because of trespassers all across the aisle trying to get out to the beach. And they weren't just surfers, they were people walking. There were cams, the beach cams that you can see. You don't even have to go out there or see them trying to get over climbing fences and such. So I just wanted to bring that up to your attention. I wanted to also say that unfortunately, I had a situation where I had to go to the emergency room with a family member recently, and I can tell you it was pretty uncomfortable to be in there. I wasn't allowed in, and then I had to go in because I had to answer some questions, and it was very scary. I've never been into an emergency room that I was just scared to walk in the door because I didn't know about what might be in there, not to mention my family member. And I think that that's important about our healthcare workers. I like that word mitigation. The positive, proactive approach is mitigation. I can't disagree with anyone who's spoken prior to me in reference to mitigation. And the only other thing that I wanted to mention in reference to, well, I want to speak for myself. Myself is that my life is completely shut down. My husband doesn't go to work, and we live at the beach, and we do not go to the beach. I mean, we walk, we bike, we go out to the grocery store, but our lives are different, and we're willing to make that sacrifice to protect not only ourselves, but also our fellow citizens. And the only last thing I wanted to mention, which was just the last thing that I thought about, was we talk about the short-term rentals and at what point they will be reopened. I have had the experience of helping a friend clean a short-term rental in the past, and we cleaned it. I mean, I cleaned, I helped. But my question to you is, what's the difference between cleaning and sanitizing? When you're sanitizing against viruses or a virus with this type of problem in our community and our nation. So with that being said, I'll end that, and I will see you again the next time.
Thank you, Ms. Bell. All right, Ray, do you have any comments?
Just one, Mayor.
Go ahead.
My name is Sean Christian. I manage the Hobby Lobby here in Destin, and I was wondering if there was a timeline for when businesses such as Hobby Lobby may reopen. And if we can open up, are there any special requirements or limitations that we may need to be aware of?
Any one of our council members or city manager or attorney like to address that particular question? Go ahead, Mr.
My understanding is big box retailers like that, like Hobby Lobby, it's the governor's executive orders are binding on them and not the city of Destin. So that's ultimately going to be a question for the governors. And I'm not 100% sure that in the state of Florida, the Hobby Lobby franchise was actually deemed non-essential. I think that was a voluntary decision on the part of Hobby Lobby corporate. Again, tell Mr. Christian that, you know, we completely sympathize, but that's not within the city of Destin's authority or jurisdiction to make better.
Yeah, and we made no resolution or legislative action to that effect, correct? That's right. So,
what is the distinction between a big box retailer that would be covered by the governor's executive order versus one that is not classified as a big box retailer?
The biggest aspect to that is what, through the CDC's list of essential and non-essential businesses, which is a huge list, and it leaves plenty of room for governors or municipalities to determine for themselves what is essential and non-essential. It's actually, like Mr. Destin said, we don't legislate that what's essential and not essential. We kind of leave that up to the governor to make that list. And I'm pretty sure that every state and every governor has a different list than the one we have here in Florida. I think that's one of the reasons why there's been some uprising in Michigan, is because that governor's non-essential list was far more restrictive than the one Governor DeSantis has done. So I think they base essential, non-essential based off the CDC recommendations, and it's a very substantial list of what they. It doesn't even give you a totality of what's essential and non-essential. It gives you it actually says an example of essential and non-essentials to give the governors that kind of leeway.
So it has nothing to do, and maybe the attorneys here know more specifically, it has nothing to do with the size of the retailer. It's more about the products they offer and whether they're classified as essential.
That's basically correct.
Okay.
The types of businesses are defined as essential, and it is a pretty exhaustive list in Florida.
So like the dollar store's open, but I guess that's considered essential because they still
Yeah, they must fall under
provide
one.
essential goods at a lower price. So it's not like we're choosing grocery store or Target versus dollar store or, okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Ray. That's all you have? Webb or Matt?
Nobody at this time.
So no one that's watching via the webinar portion of our public meeting have or predetermined questions from our city clerk and the members here in the audience. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and...
We have someone raise their hand.
Oh, okay. We do have someone raising their hand. Go ahead, Matt.
It is Ken Wampler. Let me go ahead and...
Yeah, they have a process where you can raise your hand.
Ken, you can go ahead and unmute your microphone and talk.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Just state your name and your address, please, for the public record.
Perfect, yeah. Ken Wampler, 310 Laripe Loop. It's good to see you all remotely, and it's good to hear my friends in the audience. Hey, I just wanted to shout out in support of, obviously, what everybody's doing, including the city council and the staff, and encourage you to, obviously, whatever actions you take or recommend to take, that it's in conjunction with the county. Obviously, a third of my business has been shut down. That's not someplace we want to be, but we understand the reason for that. And we're hoping that the gating mechanisms that are in place by May 1st are positive, and that we can look for a positive turnaround. And what I've always told the staff is, I'm thinking realistically May 15th. Clearly, if we start to see it relief on April 30th or May 1st, depending on how you look at it, I think that that's still feasible. Any motions or any movements to segregate out vacation rentals, certainly I disagree with that. Can't explain, don't understand why the the governor did that, and would encourage the city council not to follow that lead and basically say vacation rental is different than hotel, motels, or inns, because they're not. But would hope that whatever actions you take, you do in conjunction with the county, and realistically shoot for a beach opening somewhere around April 30th or May 1st. And again, thank you all for your time and your efforts.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it. Appreciate your comments. Matt, do you have anyone else?
No one else, thank you.
All right. Seeing no further comments from the public, I'm going to go ahead and close item number 3, the public comment period, and we'll move right on to item number 4, our city manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first item is continuing the discussion regarding the demobilization that we've been discussing this evening, and our city attorney has drafted this for you.
Thanks, Lance. First off, I just want to recognize the county and Director Maddox in particular. They were a big help in us being able to produce this document to you guys today, and they've been a big help in kind of rallying all of Northwest Florida together and hopefully come up with a consistent beach reopening plan. Moving on to the item today, I did want to first call your guys' attention to the previous resolution that you passed on March 20th. That was Resolution 2004. That closed the beaches. That resolution is set to expire on April 30th. So if this board took no action today, your beaches would be completely reopened on May 1st. If that is not a desirable outcome, you have a lot of options to change that. There are 3 that we've talked about that seem like the most likely options at this time, and I'll run through these real quick. The first would be you could direct city staff and the attorneys to draft a resolution which would extend 2004, and that's the beach closure resolution, to May 4th. May 4th is important because that is the next day you guys meet, so you could take further action at that time. The second option you would have is there's a resolution that was sent to you guys this morning, again recognizing the rapidly changing developments at the federal, state, and local levels. We had to update this item this morning, sent you guys via email. That resolution, which would be 2009, you could adopt that resolution or some iteration of it, making changes as you see fit, and you could choose an effective date prior to or after April 30th. May 1st would be the obvious logical choice there. The third option you have is you could schedule a special meeting for next week. If you did that, I would suggest that you choose the day of April 29th. And the reason you would choose April 29th is because the county is meeting on the 28th, and you would probably have a pretty good idea how Okaloosa County is going to react, and also how maybe other Northwest Florida counties and cities are going to react to what is fairly universal in that beaches are, most people's resolutions, most cities and counties' resolutions are expiring at the end of April. So you'd have a pretty good idea how the rest of the region is reacting at that time.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Destin.
Thank you, Mayor. I know Mr. Maddox is no longer here, but I really do appreciate his reserved, calm, data-driven analysis, and I think that's where we need to head. I think wisdom's going to tell us that unemotional, data-driven decision-making is going to be the best way to serve the public and businesses and get us out of this mess as quick as possible. I voted for a closure of the beaches that was effective through April 30th. I'm fine with staying with that as our end date. I believe in the moment as we sit here today, we've got a couple of unknowns that would make it very difficult for me to move forward without knowing exactly how it will coordinate with our other community partners, being the county, the state, and the federal level. I don't want to exacerbate what we know is going to be a difficult situation for code enforcement and law enforcement should we decide to open beaches without buy-in and coordination from the state. We do know that short-term rentals are still attempting to continue operating, and opening up the beaches without enough resources from law enforcement to enforce the partial openings would be a catastrophe. We know that there would be likely a lot of folks that would show up. And I don't want to put that on the backs of the handful of good first responders that we've got that have been taking care of us thus far. So I think probably the best way to move forward is to take on the third option, which is I would like to make a motion to set a special meeting for April the 29th at 6 o'clock. We will have a much clearer idea of exactly where the county stands, where the state stands, whether or not restaurants will be opened, whether or not short-term rentals will be opened, and we can coordinate and get us reopened as quick as reasonably and as safely as possible. So that's my motion.
Second.
We said
I'll second that.
Okay, well, I got
Okay, I got a motion, I got a second. And,
and I'll yield the floor for further discussion. You guys
okay,
have-
first up then will be Mr.
Mayor?
Braden. I'll get you here, just, do both of you, Steve and Mr. Overdeer, both want to speak? Okay, I'm going to
Yes, I do.
Okay, I'll get Mr. Braden first, then Mr. Overdeer, then Mr. Menschel. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. I know on item 2 or section 2, where it talks about reopening between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. and then 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. daily, opening the beaches at those times. Me personally don't know why we can't open the beaches for those couple hours in the morning, couple hours at night. Say effective this Friday, and I don't see how that would encourage people to swarm down here, and because the short-term rentals are supposed to be still closed. Let people start getting out a little bit. I mean, it's only a couple hours in the morning, a couple hours at night, and I don't know. I'm more of a leader than a follower myself, and I just like to take the lead on it and not wait on somebody else to do something and then kind of follow suit. Like I said, we can always call a special meeting and shut it down overnight altogether if people abuse it or so. I mean, that's just my thoughts on it right now. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Mr. Overdeer?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to second it on that. Steve beat me to it, but no, I mean, I agree that we can probably get it open by the 1st of May. I think that gives hopefully that's going to give the city and the county time enough to do everything they need to do with signs and taking everything down and notifying the public. But and I don't think that as long as we let them know that we're aiming towards the 1st of May to open it up, and we'll finalize it probably on the 29th when we have that special meeting. I think the citizens will be happy with that.
Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I am in favor of waiting and doing it in conjunction with our partners. Use the analogy of having a room with 3 doors in it, and you've got a bunch of people and they all want to leave through those 3 doors, and you only have 1 door open. Obviously, everybody's going to rush that door. So our beaches being open before our partners on the east and west of us, I think would be a mistake. I have a series of questions that I'm going to ask regarding that. First of all, one thing is, I don't know who's there. Is Captain Nix there tonight?
Yes, he is, sir.
Okay. My first question is from the standpoint of logistics, from our city manager to start off with, and then Captain Nix. When we do this, it's going to put in place a bunch of special logistics, manpower-wise, that we have to consider. Certainly not anything I'm against. I'm just saying we have the parking lots that are roped off. We have the walkways that are roped off. Opening and closing twice a day is going to require our staff to go out there and take the barricades down, put them back up twice a day. So I just want Lance to discuss that from the standpoint of manpower-wise, are we okay with that moving forward?
I think we could manage it between the park staff designated for the beach area and Joey's crew, the code compliance crew. We could make it work if that's how you want us to work.
Right. Well, obviously, if we're opening and closing it, we're going to have to do something like that. Now, regards to the actual policing of the beach, we're going to have to start thinking about force multipliers. So my first question is this for Captain Nix. I believe last meeting I asked a question about the Sheriff's Office SROs maybe being utilized on the beach to assist us, and I know they were handing out computers at the time. But will we have the possibility of being able to pull some SROs to assist as a force multiplier to help police the beach?
I don't know at this time if they will be available, but we're going to continue to do what we're doing. And I think depending on whether or not how you go about opening the beach, I'll still be able to use the manpower that I have on the beach because I'm actually using beach units and marine units right now to police both Okaloosa Island and Destin.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just, again, throwing things out there for everybody to consider. Obviously, we're opening the beach potentially for 2 hours in the morning. When those 2 hours are up and it's closed, somebody has to go over there and police the people off and get them off the beach. The same thing happens at night. So again, it's just a logistical thing as we move forward. I'm just throwing that out there for everybody's consideration, just to think about that moving forward. And that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. I don't get to vote on this, but I got a couple things I'd like to weigh in on. In learning by Duval County was mentioned a couple times because they opened up their beach. I think one of the things they did that probably wasn't a great idea was they opened their beach at 5 o'clock on a Friday night for the very first time after being totally closed. That probably wasn't a good idea. I would think that it would be more prudent to open up your beaches for the very first time at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Monday, and that would prevent any type of mass exodus to the beach. And to compare Jacksonville and Duval County with Destin and Okaloosa County doesn't pan out very well either. You got 1 million people living in Duval County. Well, I don't want to exaggerate. It's 776,000, just under 1 million. And we've got 210,000 in Okaloosa County. And between our two population areas, we have 750 square miles of woods. So it's not that easy to get to the beach if you really want to go. A lot of our people have been sheltered at home for over a month now, and we all see the emails and get a lot of calls. And the people that really want to use the beach right now are not tourists. They're the people that live here. They pay our taxes. They're up till now, they've all been responsible. They've done everything that we've asked for them. They bore the burden of flattening the curve. And I just think it's time for us as a city to maybe reward them with a few hours in the morning and a few hours in the evening to go outside in the sun and the salt air and exercise and walk, throw a fishing rod in the water if you want to. And I think, like these other places that have opened their beaches, you can mandate that there's no laying on the beach or congregating in groups of 10 or more, or all the other CDC recommendations, and provide our people a glimmer of hope that one day maybe we'll get back to a somewhat similar normal lifestyle. I don't think it's ever going to be normal again as we've known it previously to COVID-19. It's always going to be different, but I don't think that we ought not to at least put in writing of an opportunity that we're going to open these beaches. Kyle, I think they provided 3 different options for that. I thought the 6 to 8 and the 6 to 8 was a good idea. And a couple people pointed out that maybe it ought to be 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock and 5 o'clock to 8. So you do have a few more hours, and that would prevent people from all being there at the same time. But I'm a strong proponent of opening our beaches. When we closed them, it was under the pretext to flatten the curve and to protect our citizens from infections coming from out of state. This is the opposite of that. It's to open our beaches for our people to, if nothing else, for some mental health. people, they're not going to do anything different at the beach that they're already doing in their neighborhoods. They're already riding their bikes and walking their kids and walking the dog and exercising. And I don't think that behavior is going to change because they're on the sand or on the water. So I strongly would encourage the council to look at May 1st as in fact, if that falls on a weekend, let's not do it. But on the first Monday in May, that we begin to open our beaches for a few hours a day. And if you guys feel comfortable putting a timeline on that maybe May 15th, we reevaluate to look at a total opening of our beaches or even extend it beyond that, I'm okay with that. But I really think that we need to have a vote and put it in writing that we're going to open our beaches for a few hours out of the day on May 1st and give the people some hope. Ms. Ramswell.
Thank you. For me, it all boils down to responsibility. And we had a responsibility when this first started rearing its ugly head to intervene and really try to nip it in the bud. And we did. We also have seen that the citizens here have been very responsible, overwhelmingly responsible, I believe, in how they're handling it. Certainly there have been some. There's always folks that buck the system, so to speak. But people have, by and large, really followed the guidelines and taken the necessary precautions to be safe and prevent the spread of this. And we've seen this through the flattening of the curve, thank goodness. And so I feel like we need to really take that next step, and I agree with those up here and online who have suggested going ahead and looking at opening them. And I would say opening them not just for a few hours, but for regular hours, regular time, anytime. And I say that because of the problems with trying to enforce 2 hours here or 3 hours here. I just see that as being an enforceable nightmare. I also think that people, like we've also heard from others up here, are ready to get out and they want to show they're responsible just to enjoy the beach and the things that they moved here for. And I believe, as Mr. Braden said earlier, if we see that it's not being done responsibly, then we have another emergency meeting and we, go back and make some changes if necessary. But I do think that, and I've kind of felt all along that open air, salt water was good not only for the soul, but it would probably be the best place to be. Of course, I was trying to be responsible and go along with the suggestions of those in charge, and we've done that as a whole. So overall, my opinion is I would like to see maybe at our May 4th meeting, if we could do some sort of, I'm even happy to do it sooner whenever our other one runs out, but my vote would be going towards just opening the beaches up, monitoring it, and seeing how it goes.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Mayor. I would, if and when we reopen the beaches, I would prefer to see it open all day. I think you're creating kind of a bottleneck of people, which defeats the purpose of social distancing. It's going to be a bigger challenge on our code enforcement and sheriff's office to enforce anything if it's all day, because you don't have a set time period. But I still think that offsetting the bottlenecking of people during certain time periods is beneficial. And I have no concerns about Destin residents being good stewards and good citizens with our beaches. I do have concerns with our tourists being good stewards sometimes, and I think we all experience that frustration. So I just want to make it known that, people's kids are out of schools across the Southeast. And, Destin has always been a more budget-friendly destination, and we are in a bad economy. And I think that when we reopen our beaches for our public, because we can't just say Destin residents only. I wish I could, and I'd probably do it today if that were the case. But we can't check people's IDs as they go on the beach. So I think when we reopen our beaches, we need to be prepared, whether it's our code enforcement or just us, that tourism will return, and that while the intent is for our Destin residents to enjoy the beaches, which I fully think that they should do, when we make that decision, tourism will return. And, you know, some of the problems Destin has is we have completely inadequate beach accesses, and so we're going to further complicate the private-public beach issue. And you know, we can say that beach walking only and pompano fishing and surfing is only allowed. Well, you know, on Memorial Day weekend, which is 5 weeks away, let's say we have 20% of the residents we had last year. That's still going to be tens of thousands of people on our beaches, and it's going to be difficult to enforce. So when we make the decision to reopen our beaches May 4th or whatever the date we set, you know, tourism will follow shortly after, and all the problems that accompanies with social distancing and those problems. And you know, that's a risk that we have to weigh. I mean, and on this issue, there's no winning side. On one side, we keep the beaches closed, and you know, our friends' businesses continue to get hurt, and charter boat fishermen continue to experience no tourism and no trips, and restaurants continue to lay people off and stay unemployed. And then you vote to open the beaches, and tourism will return whether we want it or not, which I'm a restaurant owner. I need tourism to return. And we run the risk of, do the numbers that Mr. Maddox presented today, do they look well? Yeah, they look promising. But once you start bringing in people from Atlanta and Birmingham and New Orleans, you know, those numbers might get worse again. And how do we react to that? I don't have an answer, you know, and I'm not sure I'm qualified to give that answer. I sell food for a living. But, you know, and so we run things could turn out great. We could open open the beaches, tourism returns, and things could very well turn out great for Destin. And there is a possibility that they won't, and that, you know, cases will spike and we'll be in problems again. And I guess we can address those when we get there. But again, that just kind of reinforces the fact that I've been on both sides of issues before at City Hall and had to vote where half these people are going to hate me and the other half aren't. And this one is a real, you know, there's a lot of uncertainty around it, and you know, I'm prepared to make the decision, but it's just, you know, still a difficult decision to make.
Well, I think that's why, you know, the saying, throw them a bone, that my whole thought process of opening a few hours in the morning, a few hours in the afternoon was A, to discourage widespread tourism, B, allow our permanent residents an opportunity for some mental health and actual physical health. And if we did that at the 1st of April, by the time we got close to Memorial Day and started considering of opening our beaches to tourism, at least we'd have some data and we could see the trends. Mr. Braden, I've got you up next, and Mr. Destin, you next after that. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. This question goes to Captain Nix. Do you know how many arrests or citations been written to people that's been on the beach?
We've written one citation, and that was on Okaloosa Island.
Thank you.
The only other thing that I'd like to say, and I agree with Pat Maddox, you guys have a tough decision to make. If you really want to help us with enforcement, please try to mirror what the county's doing. Because mass confusion is going to happen if you guys are on different dates, different times. It just creates a problem for us. And I'm already at very limited manning when it comes to the beach. So if you guys would consider that, I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, we have an opportunity tonight.
As long as we're on the same page.
You know.
Thank you, Captain Nix. Mr. Destin?
Yeah, I think what the motion is on the floor is that we have set a new meeting, special meeting on the 29th, which will force the hand to make a decision like we've talked about today. I appreciate throwing the bone to the public, and I believe the bone is going to get thrown by April 29th. But sitting here today, I'm not going to commit to the public that something such as reopening is going to occur on May 1st. I don't think the data is good enough for me to say that, because it does look promising. But in another 9 days, I don't want to have to walk back a promise that we've made today should the numbers change. I think prudence tells us to stay the course, stick with the county, and on the 29th, we're going to be making a decision one way or another, because if we make no decision, the whole thing expires on the 30th and the beaches reopen. I think we need to stick with our partners and be prepared to have this robust discussion on the 29th. And I'm committed to getting reopened. I'm pretty tired of this, but I think prudence tells us we need to stick to the path we've set ourselves upon.
Ms. Ramswell.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
can I speak or let
Yes,
Dr. Ramswell speak?
I got Ms. Ramswell up, but you haven't spoken yet, so we're going to go ahead and bump you, Ms. Ramswell, and let Skip talk, and then I've got you next. Go ahead, Skip.
Okay, so I mean, I would tell you that, I mean, from my perspective, what I think is that we need to walk before we run. And I would kind of like to have us stick with this 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon. And I think from what I've heard from talking to people is the reason why we're kind of doing that is to prevent folks from coming from these drive-to markets. People aren't going to drive from Birmingham or Atlanta or wherever to come here if the beaches are only open for 2 hours. So I think our goal is to try to open the beaches for our citizens, our permanent residents, and not have the tourists here just yet. So I think that the 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, or however many hours we decide on, will accomplish that goal. And I think as long as Captain Nix and as long as Joey is comfortable that they can handle this policing of the beaches, I think that's their call. And if they're comfortable with that, then I would still be comfortable with that. I know it's going to be a lot of work on their part to maintain this, and then the other thing, of course, is I would like us to see us. And I know that we're different and we're destined, and we like to be the leaders of the community. And it's easy for us to say, okay, well, let's just do it our way, and then we'll see if the county wants to follow us. I prefer us all to work together on this. Let's see what the county's going to do tomorrow, but they're going to do it and then they meet every Monday. So they'll be meeting tomorrow. They'll be meeting the following Monday, and then if we have our special meeting, like the motion calls for, then we can make a final decision then.
Yeah, there's a possibility they could open the beaches Monday, and we'll be behind them. Ms. Ramswell.
Well, that's actually what I was going to say, because I know they have a meeting tomorrow, so it's possible that all this is moot. If they go ahead and make a decision, we might want to come back sooner. But anyway, and I'm not going to say give them a bone, because that's so condescending sounding, and I know y'all didn't mean it that way, but I do think our citizens have proven themselves so far, and I do look forward to trying to give this back to them.
It was a coarse choice of words on my part, Ms. Ramswell. I appreciate it. That's just the captain in me, just talking like I'm on the dock instead of in a public meeting. I apologize. And as far as the opening and closing the signs and the ropes and all that kind of stuff, we have parks that close at dark every night, and we don't put ropes in front of them. The signs are enough. They can tell people when the parks are open and closed. And I'm sure if somebody doesn't read the sign, that Captain Nix or one of our code enforcements can promptly remind them that they're not going to be there. You have people, Captain Nix, you have people at the beach now enforcing no one being on the beach. So it probably shouldn't be a whole lot of different if they're on there for 3 hours or eventually when they're open, wide open all the time, correct?
I think with those hours, 6 to 8 in the morning and 6 to 8 in the evening, all you're going to do is to conform to what they're doing already. They come out in the morning, they walk the beach before we get out there, and at night when we go home, they get out and walk the beach anyway. So all we're going to do is conform to what a lot of people are doing to begin with.
Mr. Morgan. After Mr. Morgan, does anyone else want to go on the list? Other than that, we'll round this up and come to a vote. Go ahead, Mr. Morgan.
Yeah, I would like to point out again that this is not necessarily a decision to open the beaches. It's a decision to, do we want to reopen this city to tourism and everything that comes with it? And, tonight, I've got a feeling I know the answer. I'm glad that we're going to set the meeting for April 29th, but I think that's the question in front of us. And it's a big question because it comes with a lot of implications. And, it's the reason we shut down spring break in the first place. And so we'll revisit this April 29th, but that's a question that we need to think about. We're not just reopening the beaches for our public, and I wish I could do that without inviting tourism down here, but that's what we're doing. We're reopening for tourism, and if we're prepared to do that, let's do it. But that's a question that needs serious thought.
All right, thank you, sir. We have a motion. Do you want to have Ray reread the motion, please, for everyone? Go ahead, Ray.
Schedule a special meeting on April 29th at 6 p.m. to discuss and provide direction regarding demobilization.
That sound good enough? All right, we have a motion, we have a second, we've had plenty of discussion, so I'm going to go ahead and take a roll call vote. We'll start with Mr. Braden.
No.
Ms. Ramswell.
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell.
Yes.
Mr. Oberdehr.
Yes.
Ms. Marlar. Mr. Destin.
Yes.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Ayes have it, so moved. Before we go on.
Mayor, yeah, before you leave this meeting, I do have two questions for council just for discussion at this time.
Absolutely.
First, as Ms. Ramswell pointed out, if the county commission does take action related to beaches tomorrow, would you like us to schedule a special meeting? If the effective date of their resolution is before the 29th, do you want us to schedule a special meeting sometime before then so that we can try and align with them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We'll do
I
that.
see everybody bobbing their heads up and down. You guys good with that, Mr. Mitchell, Mr. Oberdehr?
That's good, yeah.
Yep, we got the thumbs up. Go.
Second, when we bring back the resolution, probably on the 29th, is what the council generally wants to see something substantially similar, almost exactly similar to what the county has? Or do you want something different in those terms you could discuss now?
I think sitting here today, yes, bring it, and of course, if it's unpalatable, we can tweak it, but I can't imagine that it would be, but I guess we can jump off that portion of the bridge when we get to it.
I appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, I'd like to have the ability to not be beholden to whatever their decision is, just against my DNA personally. I'd like to at least have council be able to discuss and apply it directly to the city of Destin. Okay? All right. Before we go any further with the city manager's report, I'm going to call a 5-minute recess out of necessity. I won't begin to. Everyone, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting back to order. We good? All right. City manager report, item 4B.
I'm going to turn it over to the city attorney.
Thanks, Lance. 4B, we have an amended version of the declaration of state of emergency plus extensions 1 and 2 there too. The really only substantive difference between this amended declaration and the original declaration that was passed and then ratified by council is that this amended declaration recognizes that there is a physical component to the COVID-19 virus and that it may stick to surfaces and render those surfaces untouchable, essentially, without risk of health injury or harm. The reason this came about is some counties, municipalities across the nation are updating their declarations of state of emergencies to reflect this finding as a nod to the business community, because the business communities believe that a finding such as this will increase their likelihood of a successful business interruption claim. Alternatively, if the council does not want to pass this amended declaration tonight, we would need a motion to execute extensions 5 and 6 to the original declaration. So I'm here to answer any questions if you have any.
Mr. Braden.
Thank you. At the, where it's under number 1 of the background, it says that the request of the business communities. I haven't had any communication or emails, phone calls, or anything with the business communities asking this.
Yeah, and I drafted the report, so I'll touch on that. It's a nod to business communities across the country. There have been some cry for this from business communities across the country. As far as I know, the Destin Chamber of Commerce and the Okaloosa Chamber of Commerce has not specifically requested this. The nearest one that I know of that has requested this was the Walton County Chamber of Commerce, and the Walton County Commission did subsequently amend their declaration of state of emergency to reflect that finding as requested by that chamber.
And I was asked by a couple restaurant owners to add this to theirs because they had planned on joining a class action lawsuit with some restaurant groups from Chicago that are using that as part of their argument for their trying to make a claim against business interruption insurance.
So basically,
why are, I mean, I still don't understand why we're getting involved with it if it's just a business, if they got insurance, or, I mean, is the government, the governor, anybody said anything about this?
This is something that the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association is doing, Rodney. The Walton County Commissioners voted on it because their Chamber of Commerce and the restaurant owners in Walton County asked for it. Some of those same people asked that have restaurants over here in Destin, because they have restaurants in both locations, asked if we could put that language in ours to help facilitate their claim. And it's being done, like Kyle said, all over the nation. The mayor of Panama City Beach and their city council made that same declaration. It's just to try to assist the business community. They still got to go to court. They still may get a favorable ruling or they may not. But they asked municipalities to add that to their emergency declaration so they could use that as part of their argument.
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
Yeah, the only problem I have with this is, I mean, is there any factual or scientific data that backs this up, that says that this virus is actually attaching itself to the property and damaging it for a prolonged period of time?
Well, so basically, and I've got business interruption coverage, and it's not covered for pandemics or viruses or flus because insurance companies are sneaky and really good at their jobs. But yeah, so you were denied coverage on the basis of that. But the argument, but they're making the argument that it is physical damage because the fact that the virus is contagious and the state has shut us down because the virus is in our businesses or whatever, it can stick to surfaces. It's, you know, it's a long shot, but I think they're advocating for our small business community, so I support it.
Yeah, to answer your problem, to your question, Skip, if the virus gets on surfaces, it renders that surface harmed, is basically what it boils down to. And that's one of the reasons they shut down restaurants. It wasn't just a social interaction of people, but it was also the risk of people coming in contact with the virus on the surfaces, handrails, doorknobs. That's why everybody's using hand sanitizer when they walk through the wall, through the hallway here when we come and have our meeting here at City Hall. So that's why in communities throughout Florida and the country, their municipalities have made that declaration as part of their emergency management decrees.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, I had, the screen was bouncing back and forth. I didn't hear the first part of that, but I guess I have the same question, and I apologize. I couldn't hear the answer. But based on this discussion, item number 2 on this thing, do we have any medical evidence? Has Dr. Chapman or any other medical professional given us this information, other than a request from the chambers and the things you've already talked about?
I don't think so, but I think the question here is, are we going to advocate for the insurance companies or the small businesses in our community that are trying to make claims? I mean, that's, and yes, I think that the fact that the virus is contagious means that it can stick to our surfaces, so.
I think the medical aspect of this is proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, or the CDC wouldn't be telling us to wash our hands after we touch surfaces at the restaurants or on door handles or anywhere else. It creates an issue for businesses throughout the country, not just restaurants. This just happens to be a part of a declaration that enhances their ability to maybe win a legal battle against the insurance companies. It's not privy to the city of Destin. This is being done throughout the country by a lot of different organizations trying to help small business in their communities.
Well, I guess my next question is, if we're trying to help small business, why do we limit just to restaurants? Then we need to do this for everybody.
That's not what the declaration says. Go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, it's not it's not limited just to restaurants. It just says surfaces in general. In fact, I don't think there's any particular business that's described in the amended declaration, but I'll reread it real quick and make sure.
All right, you need a motion?
Kyle's going to read the exact language for everyone on the public record.
This is the new whereas clause that was added, is it says, whereas the novel coronavirus is physically causing property damage to its proclivity to attach to surfaces for prolonged periods of time.
Ms. Ramswell?
Thank you. I am all for being an advocate of business and trying to help where we can. and somebody please help me because I'm having trouble with this. I see two sort of logical points to this. The first one is cleaning and sanitizing. I mean, we're using bleach, we're wiping things down. I don't understand what the difference would be. I mean, clearly, restaurants in particular, you guys are going to be fastidiously clean, and your surfaces and door handles and all of that. So doesn't that sort of negate this whole thing? And then the other thing is when you look at an insurance agency, well, this is all subject to a determination by an insurance adjuster. So it doesn't really matter what we say. The insurance company is going to take a look at the situation and make their own ruling.
Yeah, so the insurance companies aren't going to rule in our favor. It's against their financial interest. Small businesses that have been shut down, you know, and so my business model operates based off, and I'm speaking for me personally for restaurants, and that's, I'm sure, where Mr. Minchell got confused, but I've got, you know, one of my best friends owns the Zoo Gallery in Grayton Beach. He's not allowed to open. He's not essential. The business has ruled the state has ruled his business illegal to operate at the current moment because of this virus. And he's arguing, since his business interruption coverage, pandemics are excluded, he's arguing that the virus has caused property damage to his building because the virus exists, it's all around, and it has caused the state to shut down his property for business. And so basically we're trying to raise awareness on the state level, the people that make the laws, the judges that rule on these cases, to say there's more to this than just business interruption coverage. The insurance company's not our friend here, you know, and it's not the friend of our local businesses, but.
And the way business interruption insurance works here, especially on the coast, is it won't pay you for the interruption of your business unless your business receives physical damage, i.e. a hurricane, tornado, straight line winds that shuts you down because you cannot do business because your facility's been destroyed. Well, in essence, the COVID-19, through the actions of the governors, destroyed their businesses from being able to work. And so the claim here is COVID-19 in of essence is no difference damage to your facility than a hurricane or a tornado or straight line winds. That's the argument they want to make in court. What facilitates that is when municipalities and or states and city governments and mayors make that declaration. It doesn't have an effect on the emergency declaration itself, but it does put the small businesses in America, regardless of what kind it is, in an opportunity to argue in the court of law about the policy procedures of insurance companies. This is what this is all about.
Oh, I was just going to agree with that point. This is simply a request to legitimize an extra legal arrow in the quiver of small businesses that are ultimately going to have to litigate against their own insurance companies for an attempt at coverage. It's simply an effort to assist them in the ultimate litigation that they're going to have because, as Councilmember Morgan said, most of these claims are going to be denied, at which point, when you're denied coverage, you have one choice, or well, you have one choice if outside of just accepting the denial is you have to litigate. And when you litigate, you come in with your legal arguments, and you'll have many of those, and each of those is, if you think of them as an arrow. And this is one of them, that they want extra legitimization from us to say that, yeah, we agree that it's a physical detriment and damage to your property, because while you can't see it, it is physically there, and that it is hurting your business, and therefore you should not have been denied coverage. So,
but if you can clean it,
you're making.
I want y'all to convince me here.
No, you're stepping now into the shoes when you make that argument of the insurance companies' attorneys who will counteract what we've said. And that is for a judge or a jury to say yes or no.
You can clean till you're blue in the face, but when Governor DeSantis says you're closed down for business, there ain't no cleaning that's going to take place. And I would just want to speak as an advocate for small business in Destin and throughout the state. a small segment of our community has borne the larger percentage of the burden for the flattening of the curve. No more so than the tourist industry. Not only our rental companies, our restaurants, our beach rental companies, small business in Destin have carried the burden, because everywhere I drive around, when I go by Home Depot, Lowe's, if I go by Publix, if I go by a construction site, they're all at work. And they're doing it every day. And so a few people that are in the tourist industry reached out to ask if we would add this to our declaration as a form of maybe, just maybe, on the outside chance it may help facilitate them in a legal battle they're going to take, not the city of Destin. So that's a purpose behind that. We've got a recommendation. Did we make that in a motion? Did we want to make a motion?
There's been no motion yet.
Go ahead, sir.
One other question, just for clarification. Has the state inserted this into their declaration?
Not that I'm aware of, but I don't know for sure.
Thank you.
Is there some other insurance angle that could be taken, like personal injury? Or I know that sounds ridiculous, but honestly, on the surface, this sort of sounds ridiculous, but I'm seeing where y'all are coming from the more you talk.
Well, I mean, I think it's ridiculous that I pay over $30,000 a year
And they
in
won't cover you
insurance for 7 years, and I've never made a claim. And now they're denying me on business interruption insurance through a legitimate exclusion. But again, I think, you know, and is it a long shot? Absolutely. But I think to raise awareness of this issue at the city level is a little platform we have, and if we vote no against this tonight, it'll largely be inconsequential. But you know, it definitely won't hurt if we pass it, and it would be a signal to people like me who operate small businesses in this community that, you know, hey, you got a crappy lot here, but you know, it's what we can do for you.
You need a motion, sir?
Yeah, we need a motion, one way or the other. One motion would be to adopt the amended declaration and authorize Lance to issue extension 1 and 2, or the alternative motion would be to stick with the original declaration and authorize Lance to issue extension 5 and 6.
I entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I can make that motion.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I move to direct and authorize the city manager to issue the first amended declaration of state of emergency, and further direct the city manager to issue extension 1 and 2 thereto, if the city manager determines that the state of emergency still exists on the date specified in extensions 1 and 2.
I got a motion. Do I have a second? I got a second. Mr. Braden, I saw your name was up in yellow light. You good? Okay, thank you. All right. Seeing no further discussion, we'll go ahead and take a roll call vote. Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Ms. Ramswell?
I'm going to go ahead and vote yes to help our businesses out.
Thank you. Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar? Yes. Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
So moved. Go ahead, sir.
I'll take this next one as well. We have for council's consideration Resolution 2020-08. This is a resolution that Kim and I put together relating to the permitting of communications media technology to conduct quasi-judicial hearings, and this was directed by council to us to bring back to this meeting. Just a couple highlights. Generally, the resolution just kind of codifies what we have traditionally done in relation to quasi-judicial hearings. The primary difference is that this resolution will require the public to submit any evidence or comment that it has relating to the quasi-judicial item 36 hours in advance. And if they're going to submit comment but not be at the public hearing, then they also have to submit the comment 36 hours in advance. Besides that, there are terms that describe how the public can participate. It's largely similar to what we have in our resolution that authorizes virtual meetings generally. There is one modification that I would ask council to make if you would like to adopt this resolution. That modification is in Section 5, paragraph 13A, which states a physical access point will be provided if possible. The access point shall be the City Hall Annex, 4100 Indian Trail Drive, Destin, Florida, 32541. As it says, that's the City Hall Annex. However, sometimes quasi-judicial hearings can occur at other board meetings, particularly the LPA meeting. Because the LPA meetings generally occur at City Hall, I'd ask that you change that second sentence, the access point shall be at City Hall Annex, to simply the phrase, the access point shall be at a physical location described in the notice described in paragraph 4. So that would allow us to simply put in the notice where the meeting's going to occur.
So I'm going to entertain a motion right now. Can they just, in their motion, just say, with the changes so noted? Would that suffice that you just read off?
Yeah, Ray, if you got that, I think that'd be okay.
All right, I'll entertain a motion right now.
I'll make the motion, just whatever you said. And then I have a question.
All right, I got a
Second.
motion. I got a second. Mr. Marlar, you're up first.
Just a quick question. Other than the Harbor Lane quasi-judicial, do we have anything else that's in the pipeline that's coming?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Skip or Mr. Mitchell, do you have any questions or comments on this motion?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, seeing no further discussion, we got a motion, we have a second. I'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Ms. Ranswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar? Yes. Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Vote is unanimous, so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next item is regarding milling and resurfacing and restriping of a portion of Beach Drive and the authorization to execute the task orders. Staff is proposing to move forward with remilling of Beach Drive from US 98 to Kelly Street. We're bringing this item back to council because it is in excess of $15,000. The total amount of the project is estimated at $152,952.75, which will be funded through gas tax. We do have that money allocated, and we do have that money on hand. It could potentially be a good time to accomplish a project like this if the council is so willing. So we bring it to you for your consideration, and Mr. Burgess is here if you have any additional questions.
Do we want to, you need a motion for this?
Yeah, I'm going ahead and I'll move to execute the task order to mill, resurface, and restripe the portion of Beach Drive.
I'll second it.
We got a motion, got a second. Mr. Braden, you're up first.
Thank you. The 4,000, is that 4,000 linear feet? Is that both sides?
Yeah, that's the linear footage of material. So for each stripe, that's a foot. So there'll be, it's 4,000 feet, the area that we're going to be milling and resurfacing. And that the fees are either per linear foot or per square yard, depending on the type of thermoplastic or the application of new asphalt or the milling of old asphalt. It all varies. All the units are slightly different. It's what made auditing that contract very difficult when we were going through that process.
I was trying to, I see where the striping, the thermoplastic is 45 cents a linear foot, and the reflective bead is 20 cents a foot. At 4,000 feet, that's like 2,600, and their bid was $2,900. I was just curious where the difference was, if we knew.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Braden, you're going to have to forgive me. We're having some trouble out here with our Wi-Fi and pulling up these documents because my computer's locked up like 3 or 4 times in this meeting. So if you just bear with me one moment.
while you're looking for that, let's Mr. Marlar ask his questions, and then we'll look back to it.
Question one, do we have an idea of when scheduling from Kelly to Calhoun would be done? And the second question is, what's the status on Benning Drive? Because that is definitely, all the stripes are pretty much gone there.
Yes, sir. The striping issue, that's actually the next agenda item. This is for the milling and resurfacing of Beach Drive. This will be the actual removal of old asphalt, application of new asphalt, and then striping everything back.
Okay, well, what I meant was from Kelly to Calhoun. When was that scheduled anytime soon for the other half of Beach Drive?
Yes, sir. We are going to be approaching the Public Works and Safety Committee with some candidate streets. We have $600,000 in gas tax allocated for these types of projects this year, and then an additional $114,000, I believe, is somewhere thereabouts, also in gas tax noted as other paving projects.
Okay, and like I said, look into Benning Drive because it's in real bad shape, striping-wise.
Yes, sir, I did get quotes for Benning Drive already for striping.
Were you able to pull up your contract? Answer Mr. Braden's question?
No, sir, hang on one second. I was answering Mr. Mahler's question. Give me 1 second. I'm so sorry.
All right, no problem.
Michael, I think the difference is going to be on the skip painted stripes. That's an additional 40 cents a foot. That's probably where the difference is at.
This might be a question, Lance, that you can answer while he's looking that up. On our gas tax, in light of COVID-19, what was it, barrel of oil's in the negatives or something, so apparently no one's using much gas right at the moment. So how's that going to affect, is the $600,000 we have in the budget money in hand or projected?
It's projected, and I can ask either Crystal or Julio to comment on that. They've been crunching some numbers, preliminary at this point, but do I think we will get all of that? No. Where we'll land, I'll let them answer that because they've been working the numbers even as of this afternoon.
So, but this is our first project in that projection expenditure, so we should be good to go with this one before you go any further.
This money is good to go.
So this is part of the projection, not what we had in hand, because we did have close to $1 million in hand, I thought. Mr. Julio?
I think you're talking about the half-cent sales tax. This is gas tax.
Yes, this is referring to the gas tax.
Go ahead.
That $1 million was from the half-cent sales tax.
Oh, okay. I'm like, wait. That totally threw me.
Okay, so where are we at with projections and that kind of stuff?
Okay, so what we have done is taken a very conservative look at the revenues. Unfortunately, the state has not given us still any indication as to whether or not they're going to revise the forecast or not. What we do know is that we have in monies from all the way up to February. So in in May, we will have the March numbers, and then we will have a better indication as to whether or not it's, right now, year over year, we're on pace to meet the estimate, but not knowing as to what my number is going to be for March, we're still, very preliminary, unfortunately.
Yeah, we can tell you how January and February was in the restaurant business till the 3rd of March too, so don't count on good numbers in March. Michael, did you find it? Or you
I
guys good?
believe I did. Mr. Braden, could you repeat your question? I'm sorry.
I was just wondering where, on their contract, it says 45 cents a linear foot for the thermal and 20 cents a linear foot for the reflective. I guess that's going to be after they mill it. but I think the additional cost that I was missing was for the skip painted in the center.
Right. Okay.
My only other question would be, could you please make sure that that road is striped after you get through paving it, not 6 months later?
Actually, if you look at the agenda item, they have, and I believe Councilor Mitchell brought this up at our last meeting concerning paint, the application of temporary paint, because this is anticipated to take 4 days to do all this work, and we will have to, excuse me, put some paint down in the meantime to kind of keep traffic on the right side of the roads. Those costs have been included, and I've also talked to the city manager about incorporating those paint linear foot costs into our contract as an addendum later on. But certainly, we have been on the emailing D with H&T very frequently over the past few weeks, getting 2 other paving jobs that we're about to embark on this week lined up, and then, of course, getting that striping done immediately after. Because we did have an issue on Gulf Shore Drive, and we had an issue on, I believe it was Stallman, where there was a delay.
Okay, thank you. That would be great if we could get it striped and get that job completed, you know, in a timely manner.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. All right, we got a motion, we have a second.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead, sir. Sorry, I didn't see you waving your hands up there in the corner.
Yeah, well, okay. Couple of things. Number one, regarding this, first of all, I'm positively in support of this. However, if you look at page 60 of our agenda, under the Emerald Coast striping, miscellaneous road striping of a continuing services contract. Section 3 of that is the terms of contract and time extension. State that this contract will be in effect from October 1st, 2015 through September 30th, 2016 for supplying the city road striping services. That contract was signed in 2015, and Exhibit A, which is the bid form, was signed in 2016. I realize the proposal was dated March 2020, but we're operating off of a contract from 2016. Again, this is another continuing service contract. Can we look into rebidding these things and not operate off of a fee schedule from 2016? My first question.
Absolutely. I would estimate right now if we do that, we'll probably end up at a higher price. But we can do that.
I'm not talking about stopping this program. I'm just talking about this contract is so old to moving forward, maybe we could rebid it and look at that, number one. And then in regards to Mike, what you said about the temporary paint on that project, to save some money, since it's only going to take 2 or 3 days, could we put cones or barrels down in lieu of the paint to save that money?
I can check into that. I'll check into that. And then, if I may, this is their last year, so we will be going out for a bid coming up.
Okay. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. All right, I'll go back to it again. We have a motion, we have a second. We'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Ms. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Oberdehr?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar? Yes. Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Vote unanimous, so moved. Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The next item is regarding restriping projects and authorizing us to execute a task order. We currently have $65,000 budgeted for restriping within the city, and I believe the total amount, I'm sorry, I'm scrolling down real quick, $76,582,000 worth of projects currently on the list. The Public Works, Public Safety Committee is recommending to the council that we use $22,755 from the gas tax to offset the difference of this, so that we can get all of these striping projects done this year. We currently have that gas tax money on hand to use if council so desires.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and make that motion.
Like
That
it.
we authorize and execute the task order for the fiscal year 20 restriping projects and make up the difference from the gas tax.
I have a motion.
Yeah, I live on Gulfshore Drive. I'll second that.
All right, I got a second. Any further discussion? Look it up there at the screen. Mr. Mitchell, Mr. Overdeer? Nope, okay. Seeing no further discussion, I'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Ms. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Ms. Marlar? Yes. Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Ms. Morgan?
Yes.
The vote is unanimous, so moved. Mr. Manager?
Next up is our development review system software update, and I'll turn it over to our IT manager, Matthew.
All right, since the last time we talked about EnerGov and where we were, we had some interruptions, as you know. So we have still been working towards the implementation process, even though we have been doing telework implementation, dealing with some other issues that have come up with technology, but we are still forging forward. We're getting everybody in the community development and code departments back on board and back on track, but I just wanted to give you a brief overview of where we were since last time that I talked to you. So our progress as of right now, we are still in the build and validate stage of EnerGov, and that is allowing us to configure the software to work with our processes in the city, as well as with code and community development departments. We have been working, the GIS manager and the county have been working together for the implementation process of the mapping system that is an integral part to EnerGov. And I included some screenshots of what the mapping system will look like. This is actually on our servers currently and what we're actually utilizing to test out the mapping features, working very closely with the county in doing this. They have been very, very helpful even in this crazy time. We do have our mapping feature dedicated to Destin now. It has our boundary lines all mapped through the system. It has parcel data, everything that we could get from the county for right now. We are continually improving that feature, so we'll be adding more to it. We just did a quick overview of what the mapping process would look like. Now this is what customers and citizens will see. This will also be what the staff will be utilizing to start permits and other code cases and things like that. This is just an administrative screen of the mapping system. It allows us to do overlays of different layers. As we grow the system, we'll be able to do things like white sand zones, different districts, and others that will help us in putting the process together in order to build our cases with better ease and use for the departments and more transparency to our citizens and businesses. The e-reviews process, I've been working with Tyler to get this implemented. I went ahead and got the system up and running. We implemented it last week. You should have that in your information as well. But basically, the Bluebeam process is going to give us the ability to review in real time plans that people are submitting. We're going to be able to do layers of data that'll be on the plans themselves, and then it can be sent back to the developer or business owners, and they can actually add their own comments, and we can go from there. Planning department and building will utilize this very much so. And it also helps with our paperless plans, so we can start to use these things online, have the ability to sign off and stamp documents without having people to actually come into the city. They can get this done online, more expedient, and it'll be a much better process. This is just a screenshot of what the submittal plans will look like for the administrative staff and who's going to be taking care of the e-reviews. We have been dedicating e-review managers in each of the departments. And this will just allow them to sort and go through the plans that need to be reviewed, not things that are just uploaded for verification purposes. It's a little bit of a back-end tool that I use to make sure that I can mitigate everything that's going on within EnerGov. And we can see how many sessions are open, projects, integrations of EnerGov, and any automation services that we need to incorporate. The customer portal is another area that I have been working on. Trying to get this up and running has been a tough feat, but we're getting there. We have already configured most of the website. We have to do our processes and some other things for the departments, but it's a very user-friendly, very easy-to-use site that encompasses a lot of information, estimate fees. You can apply for different permits or enter code information. We will be entering in some other info like what they call Tyler 311.
At what stage are you at in this particular process, this page, this portion of the site?
The portal is open to internal services only, so it hasn't been released to the public yet. That won't happen until the implementation is done. When we go into our testing phase with the public, we'll go ahead and make that live, and we can play around with it and do some test functions with it. But as far as the website itself, it's built, it's getting to information inputted into it, and now we'll have to go ahead and start translating the data from our current systems to the new system once we get past our configuration phase, and then we can start pushing this out. And if you'd like to see a active website and see what it looks like in person, when you come in for a meeting, I can certainly come in, take 5 minutes of your time, and we can look at it together.
Yeah, just in my other real job that I have, I have to do a lot of data mining, and the most aggravating aspect of it is when you go to where you're supposed to go to find the information, it is so hard to access. I'll be curious to see that, because that's just such a, the few sites that are out there, especially when you're dealing with municipalities and or government agencies, the few sites that are done well are just spectacular. The rest of them, you just want to shoot yourself. It's bad. So I'm really interested in this aspect, because this is what's going to make the difference with how our people, our citizens, can do business with the city.
And I'm striving to get the best usage out of the customer side. I know, coming from the background I have come from, I know how important it is to use user end data to make it easy, simple, the process. The system that we have, I actually am excited to implement, because the information that's there, that's available, I'm trying to work with the legacy data as much as I can, everything that's being scanned and digitized. However, moving forward from here, I think you're going to have a spectacular system that is going to be very easy to use. I'm hoping to win some awards with this, so it'll be good. But you can see here on the search page, it's just data that's aggregated from across the board. So we have permit data. You can sort by homes, by different types of permits, anything that goes along with what you're looking for in our system. So as a community development tool, this is bar none probably going to be the top.
I see Lewis smiling there in the back, so he's excited, right?
One of the things we implemented a couple weeks ago, and again, this was another one that was thrown off track because of COVID. However, we kept it going. Everyone was very excited about it. They asked, numerous times. We've had a lot of submissions. We did a naming contest for our EnerGov program, and this was what we sent out. And it's good. You're going to call me what? And so what we did was we distributed it to all the employees. We reached great feedback from everybody. It was very excited to get those forms sent back to me. Went through our steering committee. We'll go ahead and select a winner. They'll have some bragging rights and a little bit extra there. But we wanted to make it resonate with the citizens, because this is what this program is all about, is actually working with the citizens and our customers in Destin. And the more we do that and connect on a higher level, the better off this program is going to be for everybody. And it's going to make the community development and code departments really shine in our community. And they've been doing a great job to this point, and I can expect that to continue. We're also going to do some branding that's associated with it, so you don't just think of it as EnerGov like everyone else has. We have our own Destin branded EnerGov program, and I think that's really going to help seal that with the community. And then Catherine will help me with press releases and information to be rolled out as necessary through the process. And that's all I have for EnerGov, and hopefully I'll have some more for you in the next coming months here as we really roll along. And like I said, I'd like to personally thank the Community Development and Code departments and everybody else who's collaborated with us and getting this up and running, even in a tough time.
Thank you. Any questions, comments?
This looks amazing. Thank you so much, and just like you, I can't wait to see it up and running and how the public responds. Do you have some awards that you already know of that you guys can submit to?
I do. I've talked to our Tyler representative. I talked to them about the naming contest as well, and they were extremely happy with that. They said not a lot of municipalities and other local governments use that as a tool to solidify that with the community, so they really like that. We have Tyler Connect, which we didn't get to go to this year because it was canceled, but as we transition next year, I'm excited to be a part of that and hopefully portray our city and our system in a great light for that, and I know they have some awards that they give out as well.
Terrific job. Well done.
Thank you very much.
Ronnie, you'll probably be glad to use it, won't you?
Yeah, that's going to be awesome. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. That was interesting. Can't wait to see it up and running.
Thank you. And I look to the community support for feedback on what's going to make this work, because that's what makes it most important for me, is to make sure that it works for staff and the community as well. So that's what I'm going to be looking for in the upcoming months.
Thank you, Matt. Mr. City Manager.
Next item is staff's request for direction regarding Captain Royal Melvin Heritage Park and our bidding process. We did go out for bid, and we received one bid back. We had a conference call with the U.S. Treasury and our representative from the county, who is the primary recipient of this grant money, last week. The result of that was, very short version was that while the U.S. Treasury is not requiring the city to rebid at this time, the U.S. Treasury does recommend that the city rebid the project at least once to attempt to get more than one bidder. They want us to make an effort to try to make this more competitive, and rebidding it will show them that we are making that effort. So staff is recommending that we take it back out to bid. It's going to go, the bid packet will go back to the county for a quick review because there haven't been that many changes to it, but they do review it real quick. And we'll give the county rep an answer to this question in the morning.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Lance. Okay, I've been vocally frustrated with the pace at which this project has just stayed in limbo, but I understand the purpose of rebidding it, so I'll put a motion on the floor. It's going to have some guide rails on keeping this thing moving forward. So I make a motion to A, reject this initial bid, and 2, to transmit the rebid to the county tomorrow for approval, and C, within 24 hours of the county approval, we'd instruct staff to rebid the project, and D, I'd like a standing park update at every future meeting under the city manager's report.
All right. Is that it? I got a motion?
Second. Mr. Mayor?
Yes. Yes.
I second it, but I'd ask Mr. Destin for this consideration to add to his motion. I think instead of continuing to kicking the can down the road, we've got to definitely have a date certain that this bid is due by. We just can't leave it open-ended.
Well, the only issue there is we're not sure on what date the county will get back to us, but we could give a time frame from that date going forward. For example, 30 days, 40 days,
2 days?
Well, here's what I've put in my motion is tomorrow it's going to be transmitted to the county. We can't tell the county how fast to reply back in their approval. But like Lance said, it should happen quickly, given that it's not going to be much different, other than a few tweaks. Portion C of my motion is that within 24 hours of receiving the county's approval of the rebid, staff is going to send it out on the street.
I may not have done a good job explaining. Once it's out there and once the bid is publicized, how long do we have till the bid closes? That's what I'm saying. We need a date certain, so we're not talking about this 90 days from now about the bid. When does the bid close once it's put out for bid?
I'm going to let the land use attorney tell us in just a moment. I think there's already a parameter.
I believe under the Code of Federal Regulations that it's 30 days. I would verify, but we can, I'm pretty comfortable that it's 30 days, and we can say that for now. If it needs to be corrected at the next meeting, I'll let you know.
No, I mean, it is what it is. If it's a CFR rule, I can't say at a municipal level that it can be different from that because this is federal money, so.
But we can just say pursuant to the Code of Federal.
Pursuant to CFR, yeah. I mean, it will still be that.
Okay, I got a motion. Got a second? Steve, any further comments? Go ahead.
I do. I have a question. How, for city manager something, what process, where do we bid this out? How do we bid it? And how is it advertised? Because obviously, whatever we've done, we only had one bite at the apple. Should we expand the bid area to possibly get other companies to bid, since obviously wherever jurisdiction we sent it to, they didn't bid?
It's a fair question. We are going to add this item to the county's website. We're also going to add it to as many additional nationwide sites as we can get it to. We do have Jeff Kazed, our new grants manager, on board now that is really going to help us do this. He's been doing this, not this exact grant, but similar federal grants for a long time. He's going to help us get it out to the people that we need to. We also have some contractors within the city who are lending us their ear and giving us some advice on people that we can contact out there to make sure and actually try to get them to bid on this project.
Great, thank you.
All right. I do have Ms. Ramswell and Mr. Braden queued up. Do you guys still have comments? Go ahead.
Yes, thanks. I actually have a request. Do we have, or has the city filed the 2018 and 2019 stewardship report that's required annually for the park?
We have a report that was due last week, and we will be submitting that tomorrow morning because we were given an extension until we got through this meeting. It was the first report that is due for this grant, according to the county.
This is with the Land Communities Trust every year.
Oh, I'm
They
sorry.
require the stewardship report.
I believe, and I'll double check, but I believe we did file that. I remember that coming up for several years in a row now.
I'd like to see the 18 and 19. I have all the other years, so
Okay.
thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. Where did we advertise this the first time when it went out to bid?
We advertised it in February, and we received the bids the second Thursday in March.
Where was it advertised?
The Daily News and the in-demand website.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I have a motion and I have a second.
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead, Mr. Mitchell.
I apologize. I was trying to look at my notes. One other question to the city manager. Obviously, I understand the need for this second bid, but this, if you were to delay, we're not going to be in any jeopardy of losing the grant. It's a question.
No. As long as we follow through with this process, we're not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. I'm going to go ahead and take a roll call vote now. Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Ms. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Ms. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Ayes have it, so moved. We missed Item G, or J, update on beach paid parking. G.
I apologize, Mr. Warren. I skipped over your report.
Actually, I think we missed H, didn't we? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. All right, update on beach parking. Back in January, council directed staff to bring back a program not only for paid beach parking as well as a residential pass program for the paid parking. As with other things, COVID-19 did delay this project. We are prepared to roll this out as soon as conditions dictate. The pass program would be for residents, it'd be for full-time residents, and it would be 2 passes available per household. Each pass would be tied to the tag of the vehicle that would be registered, and it'd be very similar to our Joe's Bayou Pass program as well as our Henderson Beach Pass program. So want to provide an update as we promised to bring that back to you guys in March. Again, conditions have just dictated that we had to put a pause on this program. We are ready to move forward. It is going to require that facilities open so that we can take customers in and get them registered and distribute those passes, but we are prepared to do so as soon as facilities open and the beaches begin to open back up.
Great, thank you. Anything further on the beach issue, beach parking, public parking? I did notice this weekend that there was some work going on over by Noriego Park. I had some inquiries from the public, so I know that we're at least working on getting it all implemented over there. And how many spaces is it going to actually cover over there? Because there was some concern of the number of signs, and I explained, well, guess what? That's what we have to do. Every space has to be marked. So how many spaces actually are there going to be over there?
The long section of Gulf Shore Drive with the parallel parking, I think is going to have like 47 spaces. And then the area down at Noriego Park itself has, I'm going to say it's 30-something spaces. And we're putting those posts in every other space because we initially didn't want to create a lot of sign clutter.
Great, thank you so much.
So I've opposed the beach parking from the outset, but I would say that, Webb, you think this is going into effect once our beaches reopen?
What staff would prefer to do is, as soon as facilities open, advertise the program aggressively and get residents coming in to get those free passes and open actually start the paid beach parking program within a week or two after that.
Yeah, so I think, personally, I think we should probably advertise it a little longer than that. I think if we reopen our beaches on top of all the stress and the economic stress that our public's in right now, and then we hit them with paid beach parking for the first time, I think it might be a little too much.
Agreed.
I think the optics of it are going to look really bad for us. We open our beaches for the first time in 6 weeks. You got to pay, but you can get a pass, but you have to go to City Hall, which is closed because of COVID-19, and then you got to go through the bureaucratic process of applying and getting the pass, which I'm totally for the pass. I think it's a great idea. I just think we should delay this a couple months. So,
Not that that matters to anyone, but I do.
yeah, I would move to continue until revisit this at our first meeting in June.
Any further discussion? All right, got a motion, got a second? Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Ms. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Oberdehr?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar? Yes. Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Unanimous, so moved.
Next item up, pleased to ask council's permission to hire on Ms. Crystal Strickland and ask for council to confirm her as our new finance director. She brings with her a wealth of qualifications, including Certified Government Finance Officer, Certified Public Accountant in Florida, Certified Public Accountant in California, a Master of Accounting and Financial Management, a Master of Business Administration, and a Bachelor of Arts degree, to name a few. We will be, and hopefully will be in a few minutes, very fortunate to have her on our staff. She is well-versed in a lot of areas besides what we have been traditionally thinking of as finance, our finance department, because she has a lot of knowledge about grants. She has a lot of knowledge about utilities. She has a lot of knowledge about things that we need a lot of knowledge about right now. We are very, very fortunate, in my opinion, to have her coming on board with us, and I would ask that you confirm her as our new finance director. She is here if you want to ask any questions.
Mr. Mayor, I'd make that motion.
Go ahead there, Mr. Overdeer.
I move council to confirm the appointment of Mrs. Crystal Strickland, Finance Director, City of Destin.
Second.
I got a second. Mr. Mitchell?
Can't hear you.
You muted yourself. Hit the button one more time.
I was actually trying to make the motion. Skip beat me to it, but I just want to say I had a fantastic conversation with Ms. Strickland on Friday, and we're very, very good to have her on board. I welcome her. I know this vote's going to go forward.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Destin. Mr. Brayton, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Where's she coming from, Lance?
I mean, I can tell you that she's currently based out of Tallahassee. She's been working all over the world, and I'll let her expand on that.
Yes, good evening, Mayor, council members. What was your question again?
Just didn't know where you was coming from.
I'll be moving here from the Tallahassee area.
My second question is, do you know Greg Casella?
Say no.
You have my support. Thank you.
I'm sure someone will explain that to you later.
All I can say is boom. All right, we have a motion, we have a second. Is there any further questions and or comments from the council?
I'll just say I reviewed your resume. It's outstanding, and you have glowing references, so hopefully welcome aboard.
All right, we'll find out here if we're ready to take a vote. Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Ms. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar? Yes. Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Vote unanimous. Welcome aboard.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
For item J, I will turn it over to our city attorney.
Thanks once again, Lance. This item is a presentation, a very brief presentation of our Resolution 1927, which is adopted by Council on November 4th, 2019. This is the city's enhanced public records policy. Matt, I don't know if you could throw up these slides real quick. They're in the agenda packet. I don't think I sent them to you in a file form, though. Yeah, 1927. Here it is. Thanks, Matt. So just briefly, the history of the public records policies in the city is actually quite robust compared to most municipalities and counties. We had several locations where we found our policies in. These were all in operating instructions. There wasn't a whole lot of, they were consistent, but they really need to be located in one spot to enhance them. And so that's essentially what we've done here. Go to the next slide. So what we did, Kim and I worked with staff, and we identified a more consistent and robust policy, and we implemented that in 1927. which you guys adopted on November 4th. Just real quick, this resolution is modeled after the City of Tallahassee's resolution, which is considered the, quote, model template for other agencies and local governments to adapt and apply. And of course, it is in addition to, not in lieu of, Chapter 119, which is the Florida statute. So I'm just going to take you through a few different areas of the law and what this policy and Florida statutes will require you to do. First is emails. Really, the big do here is you need to use your @City-of-Destin email address for all correspondence relating to city business. This is very, very important because when you use your @City-of-Destin email address, what it does is it goes into a central repository that Ray can then search so that when we get public records requests, Ray can simply search the database and then look for keywords, and the emails will come up for him, and then he can respond appropriately. Now, if you don't use your @City-of-Destin email address, then we don't have any of that, and then the onus is on you once that public records request comes out to forward those emails to Ray. To work around that issue, what the policy requires is that anytime you have inadvertently sent an email or received one to any other email address other than your @City-of-Destin one, you need to send it to the City-of-Destin one. Go to the next one. Next, for text messages and other forms of instant written communication, you will be, or some of you have been issued your City-of-Destin phone at this point. What you really need to do is, so you'll be getting it soon. What you really need to do is when you're conducting city business, you need to use that phone. And again, what's going to happen is anytime you send a text message or any other form of written communication, you need to use the program that's on there that staff will school you up on. And when you use that program, that will go again to a central repository that Ray can search easily. So that will make it very easy from a public records compliance standpoint. And really, if you receive a text message to any other phone, what you need to do is send it to this phone or to your email @City-of-Destin email address. That way, again, the idea is you got to get it into the central repository so that Ray can appropriately search it. You go to the next one. Lastly, on social media accounts, the policy, of course, does allow you to maintain social media accounts. Of course, you can maintain personal social media accounts, and you don't need to do anything relative to those personal social media accounts so long as you're not conducting city business on them. But when you cross that threshold and you start conducting business on either a personal Facebook, Twitter, whatever, or just your official council member, City-of-Destin social media address. What you need to do then is you need to make sure you maintain those records, never delete anything from them. That way when we get a public records request in, Ray can send it to you and you can search your social media accounts for any sort of messages you may have made or received. It's not just stuff you have put out there, it's also stuff that the public might have commented on your page. And so really the most important thing in there is just never delete anything. And that's the end of the presentation for now. We will ask, we're going to ask you guys to schedule a workshop on this so we can get a little bit more in-depth. However, at the first meeting of May, what we plan on doing is bringing back a slightly revised version of this resolution. As we discussed, the bones of the resolution are good in that it is the City of Tallahassee policy, which is the model policy for the state. But there's some consistency issues internally that we'd like to clean up. And also, in talking with our deputy city manager, we've had some technological upgrades, mainly due to COVID-19. The city staff has been using Microsoft Teams to communicate instantly. And so I'd like to update the policy and reflect that reality. I think that will help the city maintain the public records policy better. So we'll hopefully bring that back to you May 4th. And we can schedule a workshop where we'll get more in depth on this, and we'll probably make this an annual workshop where we'll refresh your recollections on everything.
Is there any way possible to do the workshop, like go to meeting or something like that, still make it public, but not have to actually go somewhere? Is that possible? I don't know if Web can pull that off or not.
All of the city meetings can be conducted virtually, so any one of you can appear virtually at any meeting.
Mr. Braden?
When will I be receiving the new bat phone?
I have 3 of the phones connected with most of you. I think I've bothered you enough with emails and everything, but we're trying to get your accounts synced together. One of the issues is trying to get your Apple ID passwords to sync on both devices. So once we do that, you can have the phone and it's at your disposal. So as soon as we can get together, we can do it over the phone. I can leave it in your box and you can pick it up at the city. So however you want to facilitate that, I'll be more than willing to work with you.
It doesn't matter to me. I could care less if I get one.
I know. So I'll help you however you want.
All righty then. Announcements?
Yep, I got 2 announcements. First one is really a brief report. I had asked Jeff Kozad if he would put together a brief report on potential assistance for both our Destin businesses and our Destin residents that's available out there right now. So Jeff's going to just give a brief update on that.
I have updates to COVID-19 related grant and assistance programs. The first is related to small business assistance. This is just a few programs that are out there. It's not intended to be a complete list by any means. But the Paycheck Protection Program, unfortunately, they're no longer taking new applications, but new legislation is being considered at this time to allocate additional funds for this program. As of the middle of the afternoon, the number that was being suggested is $310 billion. The original allocation was $350 billion. Another program is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. Up to $10,000 is available for economic relief. There's also SBA bridge loans. Small businesses can access up to $50,000, and there's $50 million available in Florida right now for that. Some other individual assistance items for workers are stimulus checks, which are going out now, extra unemployment benefits with relaxed conditions. Tax return filing deadline has been extended. Private insurance plans are required to cover COVID-19 treatments and vaccine testing for the coronavirus is free. SNAP benefits have been increased, and United Way may be able to help with rent. The thing I'm most excited about is in the state of Florida, there's currently efforts to create a website that consolidates resources and technical assistance for rural communities like ours and local businesses to identify possible sources of assistance. And this is going to be a very valuable tool, and hopefully we'll learn more about this in the coming weeks. We will continue to monitor this process and will pass on new information when it becomes available. Thank you.
Last thing I have tonight is just an update and a request to the council. FDOT has selected an engineering firm to provide designs for the US 98 medians between Airport Road and the Marlar Bridge. And I would like for council to consider electing a representative from the council to participate in those meetings. And I had a discussion with Councilman Braden ahead of this meeting, and he said he would be interested in doing that. So if it's the council's will, I would recommend that you allow him to represent the council during these meetings that he can attend.
I like that idea.
I'll second it.
So moved. Oh, we got a vote. All right, we got a motion. Got a second? Ms. Ramswell, you second that? Yes. Okay. Ms. Braden?
Yes.
Ms. Ramswell?
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell?
Double yes.
Ms. Overdare?
Yes.
Ms. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Yes.
Unanimous, so moved. Congratulations.
That's all I have tonight, sir.
All right, Mr. Bowman, take it away.
Yeah, Mayor, just at the outset of this, I wanted to remind you that during the public comment section of this, ask the room if anybody has a comment they'd like to make, and then also check with Matt before you close the public comment section, because some people are watching online and they can virtually raise their hand to comment. So with that, I'll get into item 5A. This is the first reading of ordinance number 20-09-PC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, amending the future land use map as referenced in Chapter 1 of the Comprehensive Plan to include a change in the future land use designations of the parcel described and generally depicted in the attached Exhibit A from residential, office, institutional, recreation, and institutional to institutional providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for jurisdiction, providing for future land use map amendment, providing for incorporation into the comprehensive plan, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date, and this is a public hearing.
Thank you, sir. Well, at this point, I will open the public hearing up for public comment. Is there anyone in the room that would like to make a comment? Ms. Bell, I see you approaching the podium. You know the routine. And I think, go ahead.
Marcy Bell, 3 Gulf Breeze Court. So I'm going to ask permission to speak to all of the hearing pieces just during this one time. Is that okay? I mean, there's no point in me coming up here over and over again. So maybe you'll give me more than 3 minutes because it's...
I will give you all the time you need.
Thanks. And I promise not to try to take too much time.
Yeah, no problem.
So you guys have seen me here before you. I'm not the only one who's been here. Diana Lynn had been here prior. And I just want to talk to you again about the conservation land. Well, it's not conservation land right now. It's zoned HDR on maps currently within the city. I want to talk to you about that in reference to parcels B and C and the one piece of conservation land that's owned by the state out at the jetties. So what I want to talk about right now is that if you go back to old maps, they refer to Noriega Point. And Noriega Point on those maps refers to all of Holiday Isle, not just what you guys see as Noriega Point Park. And I think that's a really critical piece of information, because when people go and look at old documents, they see it as Noriega Point, but they don't realize that we're not talking about just the city park. We're talking about all the land on Holiday Isle, including those lands on the canals. So I go from there to the spoils easement with the United States Army Corps of Engineers. There's one spoils easement left out of all those that were out there. It's 101E6, and it covers the parcels of B and C. It includes the sand dike and the jetty system, and it was all created out of parcel B, parcel C, and the state land. And why is that important? That's important because parcel B is approximately 12 acres, parcel C is approximately 2 acres, and the state land is approximately 20 acres. So if you add that up, that's 34 acres, and that's an important number for all of us to remember as I go forward. So with that, I want to establish here tonight that we need to all talk about the fact that that sand was put there with taxpayer dollars from the Army Corps of Engineers. And Mayor, you've been spearheading the public beach initiative. And I'm here to tell you today that it's been ignored for years. We have public land. We've had public land. I cannot speak for the two parties who believe that they have private ownership of parcels that were created with public funds from the Army Corps of Engineers, but that's only one piece of the puzzle. The second piece of that puzzle is going to fall back to the Department of Environmental Protection. I have a letter in my possession dated May the 5th of 2008, and in that letter, the Department of Environmental Protection states to the Army Corps of Engineers, quote, "The state of Florida holds title to 34 acres at Noriega Point by quitclaim deed that was executed in 1982. 1982 is an important year because it was a year prior to the two parcels, B and C, that we're speaking of, being put into private ownership. Now, I can get into the details of the history of how those became in private ownership. I'm not here to point fingers at the current owners. However, it is very important that we all understand that, once again, the state of Florida owns 34 acres by quitclaim deed that are covered by the 34 acres covered by the spoils easement number 101E6. Now, you asked me, or you haven't asked me, but if you were to ask me, how did the state of Florida come into 34 acres of ownership for the public trust of the state of Florida for us, the citizens? Well, that came through a 1985 case in the federal courts over in Pensacola. I've been to Pensacola, and I've been to the federal courts, and I've searched those files. I'm sure that does not surprise anyone here. But I want you to know, under no uncertain terms, that 1985 fell before those two parcels came into private ownership to the entities that have them today, or the prior people that they received them from. So once again, parcels B and parcel C are all owned by the citizens, by the taxpayers, through federal funds and through quitclaim deed to the state of Florida. Now, I want to just say one last thing in reference to that. And the last thing that I want to say is I want to give you a current parcel comparison when we talk about sand. Now, we had the Noriega Point Park from the city of Destin, and you received taxpayer dollars and you used state grant money to, I can't think of the word, to build it up, make it what it is now. We're waiting on phase 3 to finish. I had a conversation in this room a few weeks, no, it's probably been a couple of months, and I was told, and I have not received the paperwork, so I don't have that document in front of me, but there was approximately 130,000 cubic square tons of sand placed on Noriega Point to build that park for the citizens. Now, I would ask each one of you and the people in the audience, how many cubic square tons do we believe has been placed on parcel B and parcel C with taxpayer dollars to build this sand dike, to move the sand that's been placed there? I can assure you that since that property has been made since the 1960s when that jetty was built, that I am sure that 130,000 cubic square tons is nothing compared to that number. So I ask you today to once again consider that that land should be conservation. It should have never been changed into HDR. And I stand here before you as a representative of the citizens and myself and my property owners that I live near to do the right thing and help us get that back into conservation. We have public property. We have public beaches. You have an access. It's at Osteen. Thank you very much.
Marcy, I have a question over here. Where does that document refer to cubic square tons or cubic square yards?
I think it's cubic square tons. I'm only telling you what I don't know. I'm not an engineer, so.
I think it's usually square yards.
Yeah, I've never heard of a cubic
Yeah,
square
it's
ton.
okay.
Well, then I just misspoke.
Yeah.
Hey, Marcy, how long have you had that DEP letter? I mean, did
Oh,
Diana
how long have
have
I had
did
in possession of
Did
it?
Diana have it when she was giving us that presentation?
Honestly,
Yeah, she did.
She did.
And I have it
It just
too.
sounded new to me.
it just, I mean,
Yeah, I got it.
it's only this long. That's as long as
But
it
you've had
is.
it for a while, since when Diana was.
I'm sure Diana spoke to it. You have to remember that when Diana was alive and she was up here speaking, I was in the process of learning from her. So a lot of what she was saying then kind of, I've spent a lot of time educating you guys too. I've been at the city with staff 4 times in the past 6 months. We'll talk about that later. Thank you.
I can say I've done the research as well for years, and everything she said is 100% spot on, and I have even additional records and the trail of how and when and why it was changed. And it was very similar to a lot of the things that we're correcting now that were kind of put in without council knowledge, and then you approve a map 5 years later without even knowing that the map had been changed.
I think the phrase shady deal came from this.
I couldn't speak for what happened 35 years ago. I was busy killing fish, so. Does any of this relate to what we're doing here at this ordinance?
An ordinance that we're reading 2009 PC? No, different property.
All right, thank you. All right, I appreciate all the comments, so you're on the public record, so we got some more to go through. All right. Do I get a motion now?
Check with Matt for the.
Oh,
public
yeah, I'm
comment.
sorry. Matt, you got anybody to weigh in? Anybody raise their hand?
Nobody at this time.
Nobody raise their hand. Ray, you had any previous emails sent in? Seeing none, I'm going to entertain a motion at this time. We'll close the public hearing portion of the hearing.
Skip, you're up.
Did you hear that, Skip?
I got it. Okay, I move the city council approve proposed ordinance 20-09-PC, Mattie Kelly Arts Foundation, I further move to direct staff to send ordinance 2009 PC, Mattie Kelly Arts Foundation, to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity for review of the future land use amendment prior to second reading.
I have a motion. I have a second. Any further comment? Seeing none, take a roll call vote. Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Ms. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Oberdare?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
The vote is unanimous, so moved. Mr. Bowman?
We have next 5B. This is the first reading of ordinance number 20-10-PC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, amending the future land use map as referenced in Chapter 1 of the Comprehensive Plan to include a change in the future land use designations of the parcels described and generally depicted in the attached Exhibit A from North Harbor mixed use and residential office institutional to institutional, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for jurisdiction, providing for future land use map amendment, providing for incorporation into the Comprehensive Plan, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date, and this is a public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman. Seeing how this is a public hearing, I'll open up the public hearing portion. Is there anyone from the audience that want to weigh in on the first reading of ordinance 20-10-PC? Seeing none, Matt, do you have anyone that's raised their hand?
Still no.
Do you have anyone, Ray? Ray, you have no one? At this point, I will close this portion of the hearing and entertain a motion. Skip?
Okay. I move that the City Council approve proposed ordinance 20-10 PC, city parking lots. I further move to direct staff to send ordinance 20-10 PC, city parking lots to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity for review of the future land use amendment prior to second reading.
I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Ms. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Overdare?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Skip, we see pillows behind you, so we're going to make you read all these ordinances. Just make sure you're not sleeping. All right, Mr. Bowman.
Next, we have 5C, the first reading of ordinance number 20-11-PC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, amending the future land use map as referenced in Chapter 1 of the Comprehensive Plan to include a change in the future land use designations of the parcel described and generally depicted in the attached Exhibit A from medium-density residential and residential office institutional to residential office institutional, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for jurisdiction, providing for future land use map amendment, providing for incorporation into the Comprehensive Plan, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date, and this is a public hearing.
Thank you, sir. Seeing how this is a public hearing, is there anyone from the public that want to comment on the first reading of ordinance 20-11-PC? Seeing no one here in the audience, Matt, have you had anyone raise their hands?
None.
None. Ray, no emails? Seeing that there has been no public comment, I'm going to close this portion of the hearing and entertain a motion. Skip?
I move that the City Council approve proposed ordinance 20-11 PC, Sugarloaf Apartments. I further move to direct staff to send ordinance 20-11 PC, Sugarloaf Apartments to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity for review of the future land use amendment prior to second reading.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Thank you, Mr. Overdare. Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Ms. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Overdare?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Vote is unanimous, so moved. Mr. Bowman?
Next, we have 5D, the first reading of ordinance number 20-12-PC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, amending the future land use map as referenced in Chapter 1 of the Comprehensive Plan to include a change in the future land use designations of the parcel described and generally depicted in the attached Exhibit A from Bay Estates to recreation, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for jurisdiction, providing for future land use map amendment, providing for incorporation into the Comprehensive Plan, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date, and this is a public hearing.
All right, thank you, Ms. Bowman. Seeing how this is a public hearing, at this time I'll open up this portion for public comment from the audience. Seeing none, Matt, do you have anybody raise their hand online?
No.
City Clerk? Ray? Nope, no comments? All right, seeing no further public comment, I'm going to close this portion of the hearing, and I'll entertain a motion. Mr. Overdeer.
I move that the city council approve proposed ordinance 20-12 PC CMEX plant. I further move to direct staff to send ordinance 20-12 PC CMEX plant to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity for review of the future land use amendment prior to second reading.
I have a motion and I have a second. Any further comment? Seeing none, Mr. Braden.
Yes.
Ms. Ramswell.
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell.
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer.
Yes.
Mr. Marlar.
Yes.
Mr. Destin.
Yes.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Vote is unanimous, so moved. Mr. Bowman.
Lastly, we have item 5E, the first reading of ordinance number 20-13-PC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, amending the future land use map as referenced in Chapter 1 of the Comprehensive Plan to include a change in the future land use designations of the parcels described and generally depicted in the attached Exhibit A from institutional and town center mixed use to institutional, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for jurisdiction, providing for future land use map amendment, providing for incorporation into the Comprehensive Plan, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date, and this is a public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman. Seeing how this is a public hearing, I'm going to open up that portion of the hearing for public comment. Looking around the room, I see no one stepping up to the plate. Matt, do you have anyone there that's queued up?
Still no.
No comments from online? Mr. Bailey?
None, sir.
No previous comments sent in via email. I'll close the public comment portion of this public hearing and entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion there.
You will?
I move that the city
Thank
council
you.
approve proposed ordinance 20-13 PC DUMC. I further move to direct staff to send ordinance 20-13 PC Destin UMC to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity for review of the future land use amendment prior to second reading.
Thank you, sir. I have a motion. I got a second. Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Ms. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Overdeer?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Destin?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Hats off to Mr. Overdeer for doing that all night tonight. Thank you, sir. All right, on to the consent agenda, which we don't have anything. So, Mr. Braden, you had something you added there, easements, I believe? Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Before we get to that, I got one question that's way out in left field. Reference to the Christmas parade. How do we pick the grand marshal for that?
I was asking the same question.
Who picks that? How's it picked?
Do we even have one?
What, a grand marshal? We have a different one every year. What? Well, we have a committee, and we have, pretty much the committee just nominates a few people. We have put it in the paper a few different times, and we didn't get responses that way. So, you know, it just, right now, it's really the committee just comes up with a few people. We do have a list that, you know, continues on, and we just kind of go through the list and who's been doing things for the community.
Okay. Just for right now, I'd like to put a bug in your ear, and then I'll bring it up when it gets closer to the Christmas parade. But I would really like to see Captain Tommy Browning.
Great one.
In that list.
Mm-hmm. And we did talk this last year that we might try putting, actually we talked to Catherine, and we thought we'd put something in the paper, try to get a little more community input, but you know, I think we will do it. But that's a great one. I will put him on the list.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
And now we get on to the spoils easement. I know we've had a lot of uproar about a sand fence that's been put out there, and I would like to yield the floor to Ms. Bell, whether she's educated on that.
Marcy Bell, 3 Gulf Breeze Court. Thank you again. So before I start, I want to make sure that I'm very clear that the statements that I'm going to make before you are nothing personal, but I want to bring this to your attention because I think it's important that you know what the background of the fence issue that's been all over social media that I posted about. So to bring you forward, what I just spoke to a moment ago is basically a very similar statement that I made here before the council last February, and at the end of that meeting, I was invited by Mr. Lewis, and I don't know how to pronounce your last name, so I'm just going to call you Mr. Lewis. I don't want to botch it, so thank you. But anyway, so I was invited to come to his office and explain to him the history that I knew on the parcels. And it took some time to get there, and it wasn't until towards the end of the year we had made some meetings and they got moved around. But then I had gotten wind of a fence permit that was being put up. Now, to back that up for you, I'm also in possession of a plat, a legal plat. It's not recorded. I went and spoke with the company that put it together. And we have 3 deeded beach accesses off of my street, the adjoining street, and at Poolside Villas. Now, why is that important? Once again, I'm going to go back to what I spoke about earlier. Because when those deeded beach accesses end at a property line, that was public sand from the beginning of time because it was created by the Corps of Engineers and deeded to the state of Florida. But because we have properties where people believe that they have private ownership of them now, they've decided that they want to put fences up, which is clearly one of the reasons that I got involved here at the city 8 years ago, because a fence ended up at the end of my street. Well, when I got wind of this fence permit, I immediately called up to the city and I said, I really need to speak with you guys. You need to understand the history because they're new to the area and didn't know all that history because Diana had passed away years ago. So I came up here and I met with them. Actually, I had to come up twice because Lewis was not available. I think he might have gone home sick that day. That's not a problem. I'm not complaining. I'm just making a statement. But prior to those 2 meetings, I did step into a private meeting with a staff member, and I was explaining that this was going to be a problem because of this situation, and I really needed to get somebody to hear me. My point wasn't really to stop the fence at that point. It was really to educate the city staff that there was a problem. And I was really asking for them to investigate into this situation with the spoils easement and all of that our previous city staff and management did not do. So with that being said, I got a call the other day and a fence was going up. Now, the fence is not being placed in a manner that I would say prevents trespassing. It's not placed in a manner to build dunes. It's placed as a barrier to prevent a condominium with 30 units access to the public sands that have always been public, as I discussed with you earlier. So now we have a fence out there. I've had city staff come out and speak to me. I've shown them that the property between them has a little fence that's 2 feet tall that you can step over. They have an opening between their parcels. The party who put up the no trespassing fence actually has a gate to access the property that she's trying to block from going that way. I showed that to staff. And basically, I was told there was nothing that they could do. So I'm here to tell you again that staff members have allowed a fence this tall to be placed to block the legally deeded beach access to public sands. I don't know how that's conscionable for the public citizens to accept. I don't accept it. They're my neighbors. It doesn't directly affect me. And when you hear about me out there screaming and yelling at people, the best way I can tell you is I'm passionate. Are you passionate for the Alabama football team or Auburn or FSU or whichever team it is? That's how I feel about beaches. I don't follow sports, but I feel that way about our beaches and for the public to be able to use them. So I really think it's important that City Council understands that I'm not going away. If it's my last dying breath, like it was Diana Lynn, I'm going to do it. I'm 51 years old. I got a lot of years ahead of me. Thanks.
Marcy, I have a question. Yeah. Over here. I haven't seen the other beach accesses, the deeded accesses, but I have seen the Osteen deeded beach access, and it stops at that concrete wall from the adjacent property. So I guess that's why it does not run to the water's edge, because that is state land and we can't.
So Diana did that, and I believe Preble worked on that with her, or she gave it to you back in the day? So the Osteen beach access stops at the back of that house, and if you want to believe that private property owners own private property on public sand placed there with taxpayer dollars, they have a gentleman's agreement with parcel B and C's owners. The owners are the people of the state of Florida.
There's a condo to the west of that.
Oh, that's
Osteen.
the ultimate.
Yeah, and it stops at their
They have that
fence, at their concrete fence. And
yeah.
It does, because I know that we raised that question of why did it not run all the way to the water's edge?
Because they didn't have to.
Because I guess you can't have a deeded access across state land.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. Do you know that question from your conversations with Diana?
Well, originally, like you said, all of that area was public beach. It was deeded to the state. The state had it for public usage. So it didn't end, where nobody could go anywhere. It ended at public beach and you could walk freely and partake.
Which is exactly why
Yeah.
Osteen ends where it ends, because if you take that straight line down, it's where the three that I'm talking about, it's that straight line. That's all public land. It's all public land. There's nobody who should be stopping anyone or blocking anybody from access to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ramswell.
I'll add on a little bit because this weekend I did some more digging into that Osteen access. I had reached out originally in 2015 to Greg Casella and Scott Shirley to try to shed some light on that, and then again to Carice Lejeune when she was here, I believe it was 2 years ago. And so I went back and sort of refreshed my memory and then started doing my own digging. And based on the original information that I had received from Scott Shirley, I went into the DEP website where you can look at state-owned lands. And there's actually, they have divided that into 4 different parcels. They call it parcel 1, 2, 3, and 4. And one of them encompasses the whole, like 33-something acres. And then they sort of split it. 4 now is actually the big beach land that's down at the bottom. Parcel 3 is actually what includes Osteen, but the state records actually show it going all the way, a tiny little strip now, all the way down to the water. So not stopping up as some of the other records have indicated. And I looked at that yesterday. And then the other one, parcel 2, is actually a tiny little sliver that's to the west of the ultimate condominiums, and that's it. But that was all part of this giant, I think 33-acre piece that is state-owned land and remains deeded to state-owned land, some of it at least, and definitely that one Osteen piece that I found this weekend. And I don't know if our land use attorney has had a chance to look at it, but I did forward that to you this weekend. Not really much comment because I didn't know it was going to come up. I was looking at it in regards to something else, but that is definitely something for us to take a look at. I actually don't have anything to bring forward tonight.
Mr. Mitchell.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. First of all, good job again with this technology. Just so everybody knows, this is a different system that Skip and I are on tonight. Just when we got used to the first system, they threw another one at us. Okay, but again, great job on that. Something City Manager and Mike, on the new locations at the light standards that are up, the new intersections that have the new light poles up. Many of the light poles, again, don't have street signs on them. So could you get with the contractor and see if they could put the regular green signs up? We requested that some months back, and they put them on those masts. Now they have those new mast arms up, and we need more street signs.
Will do.
Okay. The second item, just a comment. As we explore, opening our beaches moving forward, we have to ask ourselves, first of all, why did we close the beaches in the first place? It's just something to consider. And something else that we need to review, and again, this will happen later, not now. Some of our drive-from locations were those hot spots. So as we move forward and we look at this, we also have to take a look at some of those statistics from the New Orleanses, from the Atlantas, because again, that could impact us just like we were worried to begin with. That could have an impact. My next thing is, city manager sent out an email this afternoon. I wanted to let everybody realize that. I had asked some questions about the boat slip that we had with the fireboat, and the city manager answered those questions today in an email. Wanted to thank for that. Next question, or next statement. The questions that Dr. Ramswell and Ms. Bell just brought up, we just kind of left that kind of open-ended. So my question is, I guess the city manager or something, they've discussed issues or at least identified some stuff. Where do we go with that? Do we let it die here, or is it something that we need to schedule in another agenda moving forward to get some of those issues resolved?
Ms. Cobb?
If you have questions you want answered, I will be happy to answer them. Just direct me to do so, and there are some complicated issues there. We'll just come back at another meeting.
Okay.
So can you look into the information I sent you this weekend about the Osteen access and the state showing it all the way to the water?
Yeah, so is your question the ownership?
Yes, because it's come up in the past, how far does our access really extend? And apparently there are surveys that have been taken that don't even show it at all. So I think that's something we need to clarify moving forward, especially now knowing that parcel C has been purchased.
Okay, so I will answer how far our Osteen access extends.
Cool with y'all?
Okay, moving forward, Mayor. Two other things. Just again, a big congratulations to Ms. Strickland. Welcome aboard, and we know there's a lot of work for you to do, but again, we welcome you here. And last but not least, another thank you. Okay, too many times we don't say enough thank you to our staff. And I know I sent this to Lewis and to Joey and to the city manager. But last night around 10:30, I was out walking my dog, and lo and behold, a sharp code compliance truck drove through the neighborhood. Okay, it looked good. It had the decals on it. Well, I flagged the vehicle down. I didn't know the gentleman in there. It was a code compliance officer. And I just wanted to say, good job, professional image. The vehicle looked good. They were out there doing their job. And I just wanted to publicly say a big thank you. And that's all I have tonight, Mayor.
I'm sure they appreciate that, Mr. Mitchell. They deserve it, that's for sure.
Mayor, I actually remembered 2 follow-up items I had.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. At the last meeting, I had inquired about us writing a letter to the governor, trying to encourage him about adding the 98 project to the road issues that they were bumping up to prioritize during COVID. I haven't seen anything come. Did that go out?
It has not gone out yet.
Okay. Because time's of the essence with that, clearly, because they're trying to move some projects along quickly. And then the other one was the follow-up with the DEP to try to, has that gone out?
That has gone out.
Okay, great. Could you send us a copy so we could see it?
Absolutely.
Thank you. That's it, sorry.
No problem. Mr. Overdeer?
No, nothing tonight, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Marler?
Thank you, Mayor. I've been talking with Lisa about the possibility of rescheduling Founder's Day. There has been talk about just canceling it, but I'd really like to see us look at rescheduling it in September. Well, normally we do it in May before Memorial Day, so I'm looking at, say, maybe mid-September after Labor Day. It's been a tradition for many, many years, and I'd hate to see it be canceled because of this virus. So I don't know whether we need a motion on this or we just need a consensus and let Lisa handle it from there.
Do you want to do it on the second Saturday in September or third?
I'll leave that to Lisa's discretion.
Okay, Lisa, can you do that, and then you can just kind of send it back to us
Yes, sir.
for approval?
Certainly. Mhm.
All right, and just to piggyback on all this other stuff with Holiday Isle. Prior to 1964, Holiday Isle was nothing but a beach. In '64, the canals were dug with federal funds. It was all public beach. You want to blame somebody, blame the federal government and our late Congressman Bob Sykes for all that. As far as beach access is concerned, I would support beach accesses and stuff as long as Holiday Isle opens theirs up for public. They keep theirs closed. I don't think that's fair either way it goes. And somebody pays the taxes on parcel B, parcel C, and all these other pieces of property that everybody keeps talking about. So somebody pays the taxes on the property. And basically that's all. I have a comment on that, but I think the whole Holiday Isle should be public beach, but we won't go there.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Destin, you're done, right? Okay, Mr. Destin, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a brief thanks to city staff and to council for giving Destin Harvest and some of these folks the opportunity and the space to be able to feed a lot of families with the food drive-through. And we haven't had an opportunity to talk about it since the event occurred 2 Saturdays ago, but it was a fantastic event. I know that we ended up feeding over 650 cars, many of which got 2 loads of food, so the rough estimate is over 1,000 families, and we created some traffic, but at the end of the day, we got them in and out as fast as we possibly could, and that was the definition of, the community stepping up and helping everyone. And my thanks directly to Councilmember Morgan, who fed the first 200 and something families that went through the line. In addition to their groceries, they received sandwiches and a hot meal from American Lunch, which is one of the brainchild food programs of Councilmember Morgan. And finally, thank you to specific city staff. Lance helped us organize it. Michael Burgess helped us execute it, and Lisa Firth was there from 6 a.m. until we closed, and she helped bag and make sure that we had plenty of volunteers and everybody was moving in the right direction. It was a heck of a thing to witness, and I was happy to be a small part of it, but congratulations and thanks to each of you.
Yeah, and I think it was like 40,000 pounds of food, wasn't it? Right.
Oh, I love the video from this past Saturday, too. I never knew you could move that fast.
Mr. Morgan.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for city staff for being so, letting us use the facilities. I think our first 2 years we were here, we got told no a lot by city staff, and it was nice to see city staff working with us. I don't have anything, except I would like for the next meeting, Ray, to add Coleman Lake outflow under my name on the agenda. Thanks.
Under mine, we had planning for the future. I think we covered that really well with our conversations about opening the beaches or how we were going to react to actions of the county commissioners or the governors. I appreciate everybody's thoughtful input on that. Other than that, I don't have anything to add. Ms. Comp?
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Bowman?
Nothing for me.
Meeting adjourned. Oh! We have, the last item of today is public hearing, so if you have any questions or comments, you can allow them. Go ahead, Ms. Bell.
So real quick, the last thing I wanted to talk about was memorial markers for the city. Memorial markers for the city. You drive around, you're going down the street and you see this big memorial marker. I think we need to have those here in Destin. So I'm going to like to look into that and get back to you guys with some information on that. I think we also need to have like The Pelicans they have in Pensacola, where you have them all at different places, maybe along the harbor, where they're sponsored by businesses. The last thing I want to say is something that came up by Councilmember Marlar. Thank you very much, because what I heard you say was that all the beaches on Holiday Isle are public, so you're confirming to us that parcel B and C are. Private beach access, what I hear you saying is that you would like the condominiums who have private access to the beaches to open theirs up, just like down at Shoreline and Pelican Isle and all of that. And the last thing I wanted to say was you were talking about taxes. Taxes on property that's owned by the state wouldn't have taxes anyways, property taxes. And last but not least, I've brought to the city staff's attention that parcel C, the owner of that parcel has claimed homestead exemption and is receiving homestead exemption on their parcel, and they do not live in the state of Florida. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bell.
That's the county appraiser.
It doesn't matter, because, let me tell you why it doesn't. It doesn't matter because if they had been honest and not gotten homestead exemption, their home would have not have been able to be tied to the vacant parcel of parcel C, and they would not have been able to get a fence permit to put up a fence. That's why that's important. The city staff needs to have that fence removed. Thank you.
But wouldn't it be the county appraiser that would actually be changing the homestead, and that would start the ball rolling?
County appraiser's document says that they are not responsible if they're not meeting zoning and regulatory by the city. It's in the document that was signed by the property owner. I have all the documents, they're right over there. I'll be happy to share them with you. Oh, and there's also, I have a copy of the $2,500 a month document where when Poolside Villas didn't agree to pay $2,500 a month, they got the fence. And they were allowed to walk all over the parcel as long as they paid $2,500.
Thanks.
All right, I got to look over to Matt. Do you have anybody queued up that want to comment?
No.
No. Ray, do you have any emailed in? Seeing no further public comment, meeting adjourned.